We're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers say that the oil refinery strike at 9 facilities in Texas, California, and Kentucky is about safe staffing levels, and wages are not the primary focus. Tom Conway is a vice president with USW International.
This strike is about safe staffing levels inside the refineries and staffing levels of our maintenance workforces and reliable and efficient staffing in the refineries. And the situation that exists today just has become unacceptable. We have people who are working 12, 14, 16, 18 continuous days without a day off on 12-hour shifts, and people are stressed with an amazing amount of overtime and fatigue and sleep deprivation. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous way to run an operation like a fuel refinery.
Conway says the USW didn't want the strike and is ready to immediately return to the bargaining table.
We didn't seek this strike. We're not looking for it, but we need problems solved, and just an intransigent attitude from them isn't going to get us there. It's not going to solve the problem. So hopefully they look at these in a genuine way and come back and are willing to sit with us and have an honest discussion about how do we make sure we have a well-trained, adequate workforce. They don't seem to us to be difficult discussions that a management should be so unwilling to have with its workforce.
United Steelworkers represent workers at 65 U.S. oil refineries that produce about 64% of the country's refined oil. The USW was in negotiations with Shell Oil as part of a national pattern bargaining process when Shell walked away from the labor talks, triggering the strike. U.S. Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez says the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2014 Union Membership Report underscores the value of labor unions for workers. Perez says the report confirms what we've always known, that belonging to a union makes a powerful difference in people's lives, providing greater economic security and helping them punch their ticket to the middle class, according to Perez. The report says non-union workers earn just 79% of what union workers make, a difference of about $10,000 a year for union members. The report also showed that for women, being in a union means that salaries are closer to their male counterparts than those of non-union women. Perez says unions and the right to collectively bargain are more vital now than ever. Perez says when unions are strong, working families thrive and wages rise with productivity. But when union density declines, there's downward pressure on wages.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love, I hate it, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate her, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. The big Pennsylvania Progressive Summit coming up at the end of this week. Can't wait to get to that. Also, a little bit about the Super Bowl ads over the weekend, your thoughts, your comments. I've got a couple that I found interesting. I want to go through some of that. One of them being the domestic violence one a little later in the program. Was it a good idea? to put out the code call. And I've had reactions on both sides. When I saw it, I go, I don't know. I don't know that you want to give that away. But the other side of it is maybe you're educating women that here it is. If this happens, I have a shot. So that also going to talk a little bit about education, a little bit about the anti-vaxxer movement, a lot of stuff, kind of personal to me that a lot of those things that I dealt with years ago that now that the right wing has kind of taken on to, and right wing crazy's kind of crazy. So all of that, can't wait, and much more. Going to be a great program today. Also going to talk with John Neurohr from Keystone Progress about the big summit. Bernie Sanders coming into town. Cecilia Roberts from Planned Parenthood. Lots of good stuff. They're going to have a whole bunch of training opportunities, networking, elbow rubbing, baby kissing, things like that. Although I'm driving on the turnpike the other day, and I see a big billboard. Not vaccinated, no kisses for you, which I thought was brilliant. A cute little baby face all puckered up, ready to give a kiss. No, not vaccinated, no kisses for you, which seems about right. But we'll get into all of those things and more. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. You can also email me during the program, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Favorite Super Bowl ads? There were a couple of them. The Budweiser Lost Puppy one made me go, oh, poor puppy. Then it made me think of the GoDaddy gimmick ad that they didn't even have to play during the Super Bowl and got a lot of attention on. Personally, I don't use GoDaddy for anything, and that's part of it. But that one made you go, oh. The one that hit home to me, and I don't even know what the product was, to be honest with you. Anytime I hear Harry Chapin's Cats in the Cradle, I get not teary-eyed, but I get emotional. I get this, this am I doing the right thing as a father kind of thing. And as I'm watching this ad and all of the stuff's running through my mind, I'm thinking about, because I've got an 8-year-old son now. He's going to be 9 here in a couple of months. And I've got 3 kids that you wonder, am I doing the right thing? And it just took me that. And then you throw that with a nationwide ad where which was more of a PSA than an actual advertisement of the kid going, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to get cooties from getting kissed by a girl. I'm not going to learn to ride a bike because I'm dead. That one kind of made me go, wow, I didn't see that coming. And it actually affected my kids because we're watching the Super Bowl and my kids are going, wow, dead. And they kind of looked at me going, I don't know. That's why we put locks on the cabinets. That's why the TV's bolted to the wall. Your mother went insane when you were born, and now that you're older, we're still child-proof the house because that's what mothers do. And to me, what hit me though, and I guess it's the emotional stuff. I go back to that Cats in the Cradle ad, and I wish I knew what it was. I think it was a car ad, but I'm not sure. Could have been a car ad. Maybe Nissan. I'm not sure, but it was one of those things where you start going, I feel horrible because at least I'm here sitting with my son and my kids. We're watching the Super Bowl, spending a little time together. But then I start thinking about all of those things that I'm not doing. Because I work. I'm a chronic workaholic, and am I not spending enough time? Is all of this stuff down the line, and I thought TV ads were about making me buy stuff. Not making me feel horrible for my life. Any thoughts on that? Because I'm kind of stuck in this world where a lot of the ads that were the nationwide ad didn't really want you to buy anything. It was kind of a PSA, as was the Bill says it was a Nissan ad. In fact, the ad was called With Dad. Okay, well there you go. Thanks, Bill. So there you go. It was a Nissan car, and I'm not even going to buy a Nissan, but the ad caught me. So, wow, interesting. But here, I think about this stuff and, it comes back to this family values stuff that, we hear an awful lot from the right. And I got to be honest, I spent time really kind of, processing a bunch of stuff during the Super Bowl because I was rooting for snow. I didn't care who won. It was a good game, to be honest. But I would have liked to have seen snow. Snow would have been a winner in Arizona. But you watch these ads and it got me just thinking and feeling inadequate. I got to be honest. Am I not doing enough for my kids? Am I not doing enough to make sure that they're safe and developing? And am I not spending time with them? So, hey, thanks, corporate America. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. I mean, did you get the same vibe that I got? The domestic violence ad made me feel horrible as well. Because, like I said, my first thought was, should you be giving this away? And that's, one of those things that just left me scratching my head going, I don't know. Now, one of the other ads that I didn't get to see but evidently played in the Washington, D.C. area was a rehash of the Center for Union Facts ad from several years back, attacking unions. And, just what you want to do, attack teachers and attack workers, during the Super Bowl. And you kind of got to go, these are people who have money to burn, one. And two, these are people who have no shame. And I guess the other part of it is the NBC for taking the money, I guess. But here again, when you look at this stuff, it starts making me think about the messaging and the things that need to happen to counter this stuff. All of the anti-worker attacks. To me, those ads that made me feel horrible about being a father and that I'm not doing enough, that I need to be doing more, or at least, that's how I internalized it. Maybe that's just some weird psychotic thing I've got going on. But at the end of it, it just got me going, man, I would love to, play ball with the kid every day, all day long. I would love to, spend all this time doing these things, but someone's got to work and pay the bills. And it's that whole life-work balance thing that, the president alluded to in his State of the Union, that we've got to figure out how to balance some of this stuff. And for me, there's just so much of that is a struggle. But the couple of the other ads that caught my attention, a lot of gaming stuff. And I'm still trying to figure that out because I'm not a gamer. I know some people are, but do you really need to advertise during the Super Bowl? I've actually got friends who don't watch the Super Bowl. They watch gaming. And this just blows my mind. And I guess, again, I'm a little bit older. I don't understand watching other people play video games. I just never got it. It's okay. But according to my one friend, there are like several 100,000 people who watch this stuff at once. And I'm going, wow, that's impressive. But I'd be curious in your thoughts. What was your favorite ad? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Were you taken by the With Dad ad? Were you taken by some of the other car ads that they showed? Because to be honest, the car ads, they kind of lost me because I didn't know what they were selling. But very well done, very interesting. The Brady Bunch thing, okay. A new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie I've got to not look forward to. Okay. You think about the money that went into funding this stuff, and I keep coming back to, wouldn't it have been nice if we could just, I don't know, pay for education? Just a thought. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with our good friend, Kevin Mahoney from the Raging Chicken Press. He is the editor zero. Looking forward to that. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. During the past year, there have been many stories of students walking out of public schools to protest the practices of community policing. This tactic has deep roots in the civil rights movement. On this day in labor history, the year was 1964, which saw nearly 500,000 African American and Puerto Rican students in New York City participating in a one-day school boycott. In addition to nearly half of the public school student population taking to the streets, thousands of demonstrators staged peaceful rallies across the city, gathering at the Board of Education, City Hall, and Governor Nelson Rockefeller's Manhattan office. The purpose of the boycott was to protest segregation and the poor conditions of many schools in black neighborhoods. Bayard Rustin, one of the main architects of the 1963 March on Washington, helped local parents and community groups plan the highly successful event. The massive action drew attention from the national media. The boycott's coordinators approached the United Federation of Teachers, the city's teachers union, for an endorsement of the action. The union, however, declined, although many teachers did individually support the effort. Despite the success of the action, the school board remained unwilling to change its policies. After the 1964 boycotts did not bring about the change that they had hoped, Rustin and many of the local black organizers of the protest went their different ways. Rustin closely aligned himself with the UFT. He hoped to use the union's power to build a labor civil rights coalition to effect change. Other members of the boycott coalition turned to black community power. They advocated for black community control of local schools. These different tactics resulted in lingering tensions between black activists and the teachers' union that would help to shape New York's politics for the decades that followed.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Allie Bogan. On ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, guest host Martha Raddatz prompted Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker to discuss his proposals on immigration.
What we do about the 11 million undocumented who are still here?
Well, I think for sure need to secure the border. I think the legal system, I'm not for amnesty. I'm not an advocate of the plans that have been pushed here in Washington. We need to find a way for people to have a legitimate legal immigration system in this country, and that doesn't mean amnesty.
But Raddatz ignored that this is a significant change in Governor Walker's position on immigration. Previously, he questioned the need for greater border security. Walker also supported a pathway to citizenship that was advocated by lawmakers in Washington. In fact, during an interview with the Wausau Daily Herald editorial board in 2013, Walker advocated for, quote, a saner way to let people into the country rather than a focus on border security. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I understand tomorrow, big press conference going to be happening at the state capitol, the Capitol Rotunda. You're going to have Tony Williams, the senator from Philadelphia, along with Andy Dinniman, Senator Rob Taplitz, Lisa Boscola, and Vince Hughes, all going to have a big press conference on how they're going to come up with a series of bills, I guess, that's going to give people more access to post-secondary institutions, help to lower some of the costs for students and their families, and spur Pennsylvania's economy. And I can't wait to see what it is. Very little on details in the press release that I got, so it'll be interesting tomorrow. Does this mean more privatization? I got to be honest, anytime I see Williams and Dinniman on something with education attached to it, it makes me worried. Just a thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on with our good friends over at the Raging Chicken Press. I've got Kevin Mahoney. He is editor zero and also the founder of Raging Chicken Press. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us, man.
Hey, Rick, anytime. So I figure we missed our Raging Monday, so we got a Take It Back Tuesday today.
There you go. I was raging sick.
Yeah, how you feeling?
I'm getting better. I mean, yesterday I couldn't complete a sentence without hacking, and nobody wants to hear me coughing in their ears. So it's good to be back, and I'm glad, and we're moving. So what's on the agenda?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're leading there with the Dinniman and Williams thing. I am with you 100% on that one. you get those two signing on some sort of bill, setting a press conference for education, and I immediately start thinking about, whose pockets are going to get lined for that.
Wow.
And if my concern is that, you've had some initiatives that have come out of the Obama administration about access to community college and so on, which is all good. But the problem is when you start framing the discussion around education simply about cost of education and not the conditions of work, the conditions of education, then you got some potential problems. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to say. Are they going to talk about giving students tax credits in order to attend college? Or are they actually going to talk about investing in Pennsylvania's future by investing in higher education so that you actually get the kind of contact between faculty members and students in the classroom that you need if you really want to make for a successful workforce and a successful citizen body in the years to come?
I'm with you. And, the more I look at this, and there was just an article done over the weekend, I think it was, or maybe it was yesterday even, that showed the money when you look at charter schools that have flown to people like Senator Williams and others, on both sides of the political aisle, where the charter school money has gone. And I take that to higher ed, where I've been saying for years that was that's the higher ed model is what they're trying to get down to the K through 12 model. When I see the charter types going after higher ed, I don't have a warm fuzzy feeling.
No, and you shouldn't. I don't think anybody in Pennsylvania should. Again, the fact that you've got Williams and Ditterman that are on this bill who have been active supporters of charters, I think it raises at least a concern about what the direction is. But hey, if you're going to be talking about access to higher ed, you're going to be talking about reinvestment in higher education and K through 12 schools, I'm willing to listen, but I'm going to do so with a very skeptical ear. Let's say that.
So when you talk about making things, better for students, and you talk about making more accessible, what in your view would it look like? I mean, I'm of the mindset at the minimum we should be going back to, when I was in college or even before, where you could work a minimum wage job and get out of college with virtually no student loan debt, if not no student loan debt, as opposed to today where we're talking, kids getting out of college, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in the hole.
Absolutely. Okay, you got two sides of this. One goes back to exactly what you're talking about in terms of cost, right? The minute that you are graduating students, and again, Pennsylvania is one of the highest in the country in terms of student debt. I think we're third highest, number 3 in terms of the student debt that's carried by graduating undergraduates, which is huge. So on the one hand, you got to solve the debt problem. Otherwise, what you produce is students who go out into the workforce, and then they're basically, the slaves of the bankers, the slaves of the kind of the student loan companies for the next, 15, 20 years. And, that's just hanging over their head. And if that's hanging over their head, they can't do what else is great, what else they need to do. So that's the one side of it. The other side of it has to do with the kind of education that the students are getting, right? I remember last week when we spoke last week, one of the things that stuck with me, I actually told my students about this. I said, Rick Smith put it today, in this kind of economy, in this kind of world, information is cheap, right? You log on, you Google something, you got the information. What's important now is what you do with that information, is how you understand it, how you critically engage with that. And in order to accomplish that, you have to have things like small class sizes. You have to have access to materials that are kind of current and that are up to date. And then you have to have faculty members who are in the classroom who are not worried about where they're getting their next paycheck or are they going to have a job the next semester, but they can actually teach what needs to be taught in order to produce critical citizens. What often gets forgotten about what higher ed is for, it's not only job training for the workforce. That is a huge part of it, absolutely. But the other side of that is training citizens for critical engagement so that we have a strong democracy. That's why it's in Pennsylvania's Constitution to begin with, that we train our citizen body to move forward.
Yeah, and you look at this and the investment that we've made, especially over the last 4 years, in my view, not there, which is why I think there needs to be that groundswell of activity, that groundswell of organizing to push for this stuff. And this coming weekend, the folks at Keystone Progress are putting together their annual Pennsylvania Progressive Summit to kind of talk about some of these issues and a bunch of other stuff. And I know you're going to be there. We're actually holding a joint event. I guess Friday night, is it?
Yeah, it's Friday night. It's like not only is Keystone Progress putting together, but we're putting together our own little event. It's 7:30, and it's at Anthony's Micro Pub and Pizza. and that's at 225 North 2nd Street in Harrisburg. We've got a Facebook event up. You can go to Facebook and click on Raging Chicken Press or Rick Smith Show, and that event will come up at Anthony's Micropub. It's right after Cecile Richards from Planned Parenthood will be speaking earlier that evening, and this is starts right following that. We're going to all meet up, see anybody who wants to come out. Raging Chicken fans, Rick Smith Show fans, come on out to Anthony's Micropub and Pizza, and we'll kind of talk politics and where to go. So I'm totally excited about that. I'm also, I got to say, maybe I'm too skeptical for my own good. But one of my concerns going forward, or not concerns, the thing that's on my mind, I guess, about moving to this year's PA Progressive Summit is that I always look forward to it. I always look forward to the conversations and the planning and the opportunity. But I'm also really wary about how people are preparing and how we're all preparing for that next round of elections that are coming up, not just the ones for the judges coming up here, but in 2016. And, you've got these folks out there, I've got this, I've been labeling, you got the Ready for Warren people and you got the TGIW, the Thank God It's Wolf kind of crew, right? The whole idea that, if we just get these one or two good people in there, it's going to solve all our problems. Yeah, the saviors, the messiahs.
It's like 2008 with Obama. I said the worst thing that happened, 2009, he takes office, everybody disappeared.
And that's what happened. And that's my concern right now. It's like what's really interesting watching what's going on with the Ready for Warren people, because right about mid-January, predictably, once the GOP questioning about who's going to run kind of came up, you started seeing these more and more articles coming out of the progressive press about, Warren should run. And look, I love Elizabeth Warren, right? I think she's fantastic. She's one of the few politicians that walks the walk. But the thing is that it just shows once again, that we haven't learned our lesson from Obama. There is no one savior, right? That you've got to be on the ground and organizing. And frankly, this is her first term senator. She's in there, and she could be the insider that builds a kind of, builds a critical mass inside the Senate and inside the Congress, right? But instead, we want to pull her out because we want to raise her up and say that she's this awesome person, which she is, and then run her for president to solve all our problems. That's not going to work. And then if you look at all the issues that she's actually talking about, what's given the issues of things like, raising the minimum wage and kind of, the anti-Wall Street stuff, what's given all that stuff traction is not Elizabeth Warren. She's part of it, but it's been the people on the ground organizing. I mean, if you look at like the Fight for 15 people, you had a huge march in Philly, like 7,000 people kind of came out and supported this stuff. You've got these folks who are organizing on the ground to say, listen, we need a living wage. We need to take back our democracy. And those are the people on the outside that we should be supporting. And yet my concern is that once again, progressives are going to be willing to open up their wallets and dump a ton of cash into the campaign coffers of politicians and forget the fact that the politicians mean nothing unless you actually support your progressive infrastructure. Media outlets like yours, like mine, but also the folks on the ground who are doing the organizing, the worker centers like in Vermont, the people like Fight for 15 in Philadelphia. That's where we really have to be developing and to kind of shift our gaze away from, the kind of the Hollywood of politics into the people on the ground who are our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues.
Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it, the Hollywood of politics. It's all about the big, sexy races. It's not about all of the other things that go into it and building that grassroots organization that past generations had built when Democrats were actually Democrats. I mean, to me, you look at the party structure and, I think the call for Warren is to kind of pull the Democratic Party back toward working people. I'm not a huge Hillary fan, to be honest with you. But I would love to see somebody push her farther, not so much to the left, if you will, but to sanity.
Well, I agree, but this is why I think that a Warren, given the fact that this is her first term in the Senate, she's got a long ways to build in the Senate. Well, I'm really excited that you've got Bernie Sanders, who's making waves right now, and he's going to be at the Keystone Progress, the Progressive Summit this weekend. He's giving the keynote on Saturday morning, and that he may throw his head in. I would love to see Bernie run. And I think that most people would probably agree that Bernie's not going to be the guy who's going to win that race, although I would love that. But the fact is, Bernie is the guy who's got a long track record of pushing for the exact, policies and legislation that is needed for working families, in support of working families. So the fact that he's thinking about getting in the race, I'm super happy about. I'm looking forward to seeing him on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Bernie has been a guy I've respected for years. In fact, I like saying it because it's true, and it bodes well for the program. Bernie Sanders was the very first guest on this program almost 10 years ago.
Well, you know, and I think every one of your listeners should kind of peek up their ears at this point and realize that, look, Bernie Sanders came to your show in Pennsylvania to talk, right? That he was your guest, right? Your first guest of coming on. And that shows not just a lot about Bernie's commitments, but also about your commitments and what you're trying to do here and kind of building this capacity. Because you're right. Bernie is kind of on the money when it comes to supporting working families.
He's not kind of. He is spot on the money. And at the end of the day, I think he's the best person to be out there and pushing for that. Being the voice of the working people to kind of push it off. So I'm looking forward to Friday. I think it'll be a great opportunity to get people together for our meetup at Anthony's Brew Pub and Pizza Place. I think it'll be a great time. But I think the weekend is going to be good to rub elbows, network, get some training, maybe kiss babies. I don't know. If you want more information, paprogressivesummit.net is the website. We're going to be talking with John Newrohr, their communications director, in the third hour of the program. So you'll want to stick around for that. So let's bring this back to education then.
Yep.
Because, there's a bunch of organizing going on, a bunch of adjunct professors going, hey, we want to, have dignity, respect on the job. I see in Syracuse, for instance, the occupation's been going on for what? How long has it been going on there?
Well, it was actually the occupation took place. They closed it right before Thanksgiving. It was an 18-day occupation of the administration building at Syracuse University. And part of the issues were there was the university closed the Rape Crisis Center. It was called the Advocacy Center. But there have been some long-standing issues that had to do with wages of teaching assistants and adjunct faculty, whole bunch of stuff. And they ended their occupation right before the Thanksgiving break. And what they said was, look, this is the end of phase one. We're getting ready for phase two. Right. And everyone's been, well, not everybody, but a lot of us have been paying attention and say, what's going to happen? Are they actually going to move forward with that phase two? And sure enough, this is the organization to watch when it comes to student organization in higher education right now. Because basically what they did is they said, okay, instead of just trying to continue the occupation until the police come in to arrest us, what we're going to do is we're going to start planning to build our movement. And this past weekend, they held a 2-day teach-in that held workshops, everything from the history of student activism at Syracuse and across the country, about how to build political capacity, how to organize to fight back. And I'm saying that this is exactly the model that people should be looking at and paying attention to, because they have the long term in view. This is an organization that's in it for the long haul. At least that's the way they're looking at right now. And so we hope to be talking to the Raging Chicken this week. We hope to be talking to some folks from the general body. That's the student coalition that organized the sit-in and the teach-in this past weekend. But they're definitely the one to watch. And if you look up the general body at Syracuse University, you catch up on what's happening there, because it's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to following that, because as you when you come on and you talk with us, you always give us an update, and I'm happy with that. Kevin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Appreciate the work you guys do over at the Raging Chicken Press. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday.
Yeah, me too, man. See you then, and here's to the fight back.
All righty, our good friend Kevin Mahoney, editor zero over at the Raging Chicken Press. If you want to check out the website, go to ricksmithshow.com, click on Kevin's name, take you right there. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. More working people come to talk.
I got a picture in my pocket of the lucky one. I'll announce the winner on the radio with my microphone. I do a super show. I wear a cowboy hat. It is my business hat. I'm on till 1 a.m. I must tell you that I'm a man with a mission.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Another day, another pipeline goes kablooey.
U.S. pipelines now rupturing faster than we can keep track of them.
The two brokered a new nuclear deal allowing U.S. companies to provide India with reactors for commercial purposes.
Obama's trip to India, a boost to nuclear energy.
We have the window of opportunity.
International Monetary Fund calls for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, plus some good news. Fracking banned in Scotland, and a red fox returns to Yosemite.
All of those returns and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yosemite National Park says a rare Sierra Nevada red fox has been sighted in the park for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Oh, boy, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
For listeners old enough to get that joke, you're welcome. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air and even as pipelines are still rupturing all over the country, the U.S. Senate, it seems, has now finally passed a bill to force the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yep, it goes back to the House now, but they still don't have enough votes yet in the Senate to override a promised presidential veto, so it's just more theater.
And for the record, the 9 Democrats who are joining all of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to support Keystone XL pipeline, that would be Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, Tom Carper of Delaware, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, John Tester of Montana, and Mark Warner of Virginia. All of those Democrats calling for the dirtiest oil in the world to be shipped from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico to be shipped overseas for maybe 50 permanent jobs for a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Thanks, Democrats.
And a correction. Earlier this week, we mistakenly reported that there were 4 pipeline ruptures in the month of January alone in the U.S., but actually, we were wrong.
Who does your fact-checking, Desi Doyen?
In fact, there have been 5 pipeline ruptures in the month of January.
Oh, man, so it's worse than even you thought.
Yep, and there's a reason for these pipeline problems. An investigation on pipeline safety and oversight from the National Transportation and Safety Board released this week found, quote, systemic flaws. Not only are gas companies failing to conduct inspections and tests on their aging pipelines in populated areas, but the states have inconsistent regulations and not enough trained inspectors.
And by not enough, you mean sometimes none at all.
Right. Sometimes those states don't inspect any of them. President Obama's recent trip to India concluded with no climate agreement, unlike his recent historic emissions deal with China. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is not ready to commit to emissions cuts, but the 2 leaders did reach a modest agreement to cooperate on clean energy development and financing. The biggest winners, however, were the U.S. nuclear industry, because Modi agreed to repeal India's liability laws that require nuclear energy companies to pay all the costs of a nuclear accident, and instead will probably foist it off onto India's taxpayers.
So American companies are free to build nuke plants in India now without having to pay up if things go wrong?
That's right.
Nice. Thanks, Obama.
Calls are growing around the world for governments to use the current slump in oil prices to phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
We have a window of opportunity. The price of oil has gone down significantly and probably for a period of time. Now is the time to actually remove the world over the subsidies to use of energy.
Well, who was that hippie leftist calling for the end of fossil fuel subsidies?
That was the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christina Lagarde, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, the world spends about $550 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. U.S. taxpayers shell out $5 billion to the oil industry in permanent tax breaks.
So the call is stop helping out these oil companies. They're doing fine. They don't need our help anymore. Put that money elsewhere where it can actually do some good.
That's right. Finally, some good news. Fracking has just been banned in Scotland. The temporary moratorium will allow the Scottish government to conduct scientific studies on environmental impacts. Pennsylvania's new Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, has also banned fracking in state parks and forests. And finally, the rare and elusive Sierra Nevada red fox has been spotted in Yosemite National Park for the first time in nearly 100 years. It's one of the rarest animals in North America. Likely fewer than 50 remain.
Wow, just 50. Nonetheless, some good news there. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. For more good news and occasionally some bad news, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are now celebrating our 11th anniversary of independent troublemaking and muckraking. But we need your help to continue. Please stop on by and consider a donation to help us do exactly that. Find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
So how many people saw the report that Aetna, the big insurance company, that they're going to hike their minimum wage for all employees that work for Aetna to at least $16 per hour. That's the minimum wage at Aetna, $16 an hour. And I guess, as one person told me, well, it's Obamacare. And I'm okay with taking money from shareholders and giving it to workers to be able to, pay their bills. I'm okay with that. But $16 an hour. Now, what's interesting is the increase to $16 an hour at Aetna is going to cost about $25 million in 2016. So by doing this and getting a lot of really good PR out of it, give them credit. They play the PR game pretty well. They're going to spend $25 million in 2016. Think about what the CEO of Aetna put in his pocket. So now to bring everybody up to $16 an hour, all of the workforce, and I think there are tens of thousands of workers at Aetna. So you're bringing these people up to $16 an hour. They paid their CEO $30.7 million in 2013. It's the last time I could find a number for it. So $30.7 million in 2013 to one guy, and it's going to cost him $25 million in 2016 to bring everyone up to at least $16 an hour. And yet you still have those voices out there that we just can't afford it. Can't do it. Sorry, cannot do it. Because it would just kill business. Oh, it'd kill them. How many times have you heard that? You know what? I actually had someone told me that they've never heard that. So that's why I found it interesting that the York Daily Record ran an editorial piece. And you got to love the editorial pieces. Basically a big sloppy wet kiss to York Senator Scott Wagner. Big sloppy wet kiss. By saying, he's, well, let me read exactly what they wrote. Because it was one of those things that made me kind of chuckle. In that, in Harrisburg, nobody wants to compromise. And, it's all about this, hindbound, backroom kind of stuff. Close-minded culture. He writes, the editorial board says, it's good that he's an independent thinker of Scott Wagner. I'm going, really? Is that what you call insanity? Okay. He's an independent thinker. Even if you don't like what he thinks, it's a sign that he might have the potential to change the hindbound, closed-minded culture of our legislature. And my first thought was, well, wipe the brown off your nose, because what he's proposed in increasing the minimum wage, really, honestly and truthfully, no serious person would go, yeah, that's what we want to do. This is purely Machiavellian politic. This is purely taking an issue away from your enemy and going, we're going to solve it. Even because look, it's crummy. Now, in the editorial board's defense, they are saying $8.75 over the next 3 years is going to do virtually nothing. It's not. It will barely even cover the cost of gasoline to get to work. But they then start calling for a compromise. And this is where it just kind of blew my mind, because they're giving Wagner credit for wanting to compromise on the issue, going, between 725 and 1010, 875 is a compromise. No. And this is what blows my mind. 1010 is the compromise. Understand, we're calling for 15. So you go from 15 to 7.25, 1010 somewhere around the middle. You go, okay, that's the compromise. And this is what Democrats do. And it's what infuriates me about Democrats is they start negotiating where they want to be. So they say, well, we would like the wage to be at $10.10, please. So that's what we're going to ask for. And I'm going, you probably weren't a very good kid, were you? You start off with, hey, can I have the whole box of candy, Mom? And Mom will say, no, but you can have a piece. And you won because you settled for a piece, but you knew if I ask for the whole box, she'll give me a piece. If you ask for a piece, you'll spoil your dinner. See, and this is where, and I guess they just weren't good kids. They just weren't very bright. This is how Democrats always out negotiate themselves. It's kind of like Pete Carroll during the Super Bowl, outthinking himself. This is where Democrats do this dumb stuff. And horrible negotiators at the table. Yes, I'm going to start with what I want. No, ding-dongs. You start with the world. I want it all. And I'll settle for half. Because this is what the right does masterfully. Masterfully. We want everything. And then they'll settle for incremental, the death of 1,000 paper cuts, if you will. And to me, the minimum wage people already lost. Because Wagner just came in and snatched the issue from you. Now, maybe I'm probably going to tick a lot of people off, but that's the reality. All of this talk of 10 an hour, it should have been 15. There's an entire movement of people who are marching in the street going, damn it, we want 15 in a union. That's where you should make your argument. And then when people are in the streets with pitchforks, yes, 15 in a union, 15 in a union. You go, okay, well, we're going to have to, the only way we can hold these people back, the only way we can hold the masses back with the pitchforks and the platters for heads is by going to 10 or $12 an hour. Something. Got to give them something. Got to throw me a bone. $8.75 ain't going to do it. You got to throw me a bone. I got all these people with pitchforks. Help me. Democrats don't do that. As where Republicans are very good at it. You remember the T-Twit stuff? They showed the rage all around the country. They had these little scripted meetings where they got somebody all worked up with the government's coming after you, and they went out and they acted insane. And the Republicans came back to the Democrats going, you better watch out. They're all fired up. You better give them something. And then came everything. Sequester, you name it. Austerity out the behind. And we lost. And you go, ding dongs, hello. Where did you learn to negotiate? Me, I learned virtually everything I needed to know when I was a little kid, swapping baseball cards. Maybe they didn't. And maybe that's a problem. When you've got folks who aren't smart enough to negotiate or even understand the concept of starting off over here and then working your way back. You don't start where you want to be. It's just common sense. Just is what it is, though. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, going to have Sean Kitchen, Rick Smith Show Capitol reporter on the program, talk about the big press conference today for education. The pre-K for PA people were out advocating for, we should have, actually, I think we should have kindergarten before pre-K. But that's a whole nother thing we'll get into. Take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Now who'd have thought that after all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all? Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll?
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
This is your world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Escalating violence in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula has convinced Egyptian authorities to expand a planned buffer zone to be cleared along the border with Gaza. On Sunday, 3 women were killed following a shelling attack and a firefight between security forces and militants calling themselves Sinai Province. That group isn't talked about much in the West, but they're responsible for a growing number of incidents in Egypt, including coordinated attacks last Thursday that left at least 30 soldiers dead. Sinai Province has pledged its allegiance to the Islamic State and was previously supportive of al-Qaeda after it began operations in 2011. Following recent attacks, Egypt will now widen that buffer zone with Gaza to 3 miles, distance that would encompass the entirety of the ancient city of Rafah, which has served as a checkpoint into Palestine. That was Russian President Vladimir Putin at a signing ceremony for the Eurasian Economic Union last year, saying that, quote, wherever I go and whomever I meet, everyone wants to know how to establish relations with the new Eurasian Union. But that might not be the case anymore, if it ever was. Belarus, along with Armenia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, is partnered with Russia in that union. It's a regional customs bloc, and while that's good in times of prosperity, the crisis in Ukraine has hurt the Russian economy and the economy of Belarus by extension. Direct disagreement between the frequent allies has also been touched off after Russia banned food exports from Belarus after it was found to be trading with countries that backed sanctions on Moscow. Now, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has gone a step further, threatening to leave the group if there isn't a resolution over that disagreement. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
So, according to the Director of National Intelligence, President Obama and the administration, they're proposing on spending something close to stop and think about this, $54 billion. $54 billion on spying and intelligence. Now, yep, it's more than $1 billion each and every week to keep an eye on folks. A federal law requires the DNI to disclose how much money they're anticipating to spend by the CIA and the other 6 federal departments that do the intelligence stuff. But the law doesn't permit a breakdown of spending, so we don't know who's spending what or where, because then, the terrorists might know and win. But, I look at this and I'm going, almost $54 billion. What if we took that and spent it on education? I don't know, like pre-K, like getting kids a little, hell, how about kindergarten, mandating kindergarten in Pennsylvania? Just blows my mind. But today I sent our Capitol reporter, Sean Kitchen, over to the Capitol to sit in on the pre-K for Pennsylvania press conference. Sean, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rick.
So, big presser today, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there's like 20, 25 parents who from the different organizations that are sponsoring the pre-K PA movement. And it wasn't really a press conference day, but it was more or less them going around the Senate and the House and talking to different state reps and state senators about what's going on and why we should have pre-K in Pennsylvania.
Shouldn't they start with mandatory kindergarten first?
Yeah, I mean, that right there just completely blows my mind. I mean, as someone who grew up in Philadelphia, went to Catholic school, so kindergarten was included, but I also had preschool, and it just blows my mind that you don't have that in Pennsylvania, which I find it to be absolutely ridiculous. Like, that's just, my jaw just drops every time I hear that.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it either when I moved here that kindergarten was not mandatory. That you don't. I guess kids don't have to go to school. I think it's 8 is when they have to go to school.
Yeah, I mean, you have the freedom to keep your kids dumb. I guess you can call freedom.
So what were they saying? What are the benefits? Look, I sent my 3 kids to pre-K programs, to private tutors and stuff to try and get them the head start that they need going into kindergarten and beyond, and they've been very successful. Granted, it cost me a small fortune, but they got that leg up that they needed. And I think all kids should be able to have that.
Right, and one of the arguments they're putting out today is that your developmental years, between ages 1 and 5, is one of the most crucial time periods for a student to absorb everything. For kids to absorb information in the world around them, and having them go to school between the ages of 3 and 4 gives them a head start, where at 7 or 8. And what that does is it reduces the need for special education needs. You're going to put up more money up front for this, but what you're doing is you're going to you're going to get that money back as a state later on down the road.
So by investing in pre-K programs, investing in education at a younger age, teaching them to learn to read and write and doing those things, that's going to pay dividends. So we don't have to lock them up. Is that the case?
Yeah, so you're not going to put them in jail. Incarceration rates would go down. The needs for special ed spending would go down, and the students don't have to repeat grades.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: if we do this, which I got as a parent, I'm all in favor of, but what's the private prison industry going to do? We've got contracts. Some of them mandate a certain number of heads in those beds, and if we're not failing at least some kids, who's going to go to prison and fill the coffers?
I don't know. It looks like they're going to dig deeper and see who else is out there to lock up. And the thing is, what they're trying to do is they're trying to implement this in 3 stages. So the first stage is to get those who need it the most, which would be those living 300% underneath the poverty level, and that would add an extra $484 million to the actual budget. And the budget for pre-K spending is only 0.6% of the overall general fund, which is $165 million.
Right.
In other states, in the states around us, that would be they spend 1.4 to 1.7% of their total budget on pre-K spending.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do we compare with the rest of the nation, or at least our neighbors?
Well, pretty poor. New York, yeah, we have more 3-year-olds in grade schools in New York, but the one of the most ridiculous stats I saw today was that Pennsylvania, 10% of 3-year-olds are in pre-K services. 25% of 4-year-olds are in pre-K services. West Virginia, okay, it's 18% of 3-year-olds, and then 85% of 4-year-olds.
Wow. So again, we're actually pulling West Virginia backwards. We actually make West Virginia look good. All right, there's something, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, at least they're not living up to the Pennsylvania stereotype.
Look at West Virginia's going, hey, just be glad you're not Pennsylvania. Their kids don't get to go to pre-K. That's mind-blowing. Only, what'd you say, 10% of 3-year-olds?
In Pennsylvania are in some kind of pre-K service. And then 25% of 4-year-olds. So it's not even that big of a jump.
That's insane to me. I mean, when you're, wow.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's only those who can afford it that are sending their kids there. And what they're proposing is to increase taxes by like 0.1% on some things, income tax, sales tax, or realty transfers. They want to try to maybe see like you can also raise money by putting like a 10-cent tax on a 6-pack of beer or malt beverage, $1 on the cigarette taxes. So stuff like that they're looking at doing.
Okay.
And you could raise a lot of different money that way instead of just raising up your income tax a lot.
Yeah, so basically the sin taxes, we're going to fund education on sin taxes, much like we've been doing for, I don't know, the last 20 or 30 years. Great.
Yeah. Hey, where you get the quick money at?
I don't know that it's quick. I think it's ridiculous, and it shows our priorities are kind of
It's a
skewed.
regressive tax.
I mean, I look at it, and I look at other countries, and I don't know if you remember the whole privatization of the lottery attempt, where they tried to privatize the management of the lottery. The woman from Camelot Global came in to testify before the Senate, I think it was, and she's going through where in the UK they use all the lottery proceeds for things like the Olympics, bringing the Olympics to the country, arts, humanities, cultural things to kind of lift up society as a whole. Enrichment stuff, as we're using the lottery money for seniors and core programs that as a society should be part of our DNA and part of who we are. And I don't know, it says a lot to me that we're doing this stuff on vice spending and not just as a matter of course.
Well, and look what happened with Philadelphia School District over the past year with the cigarette tax. I mean, we put a regressive tax on a poor community on a pack of cigarettes. $2 more for poor people who smoke cigarettes, and people, were buying their cigarettes when they had to work outside the area. They were buying their cigarettes outside the city of Philadelphia, and so the people who actually got stuck with paying that bill and not raising enough money are the people who are stuck inside the city who don't have modes of transportation, and they're poor, and they're still going to use their cigarettes for that money. Morally, it's a really bad issue.
Yeah,
but no, it's something we have to figure out, and I think something, it's a really good progressive budget item to pay up front and save all that money down the road, because you're getting $7 to $17 back for every dollar you put into the system.
Yeah, it seems like we used to understand investing, and somehow we just lost our ever-loving freaking minds. So last question, anybody championing this? Anyone in the House and the Senate, anybody we can go, hey, this is a good guy on this issue, or no, not yet?
I haven't seen it yet. Really, what they've been doing is talking to a lot of lobbying their state reps and state senators for the past year. I'm really looking forward to seeing if any legislation is going to come out on this, especially with the budget coming up.
Right.
I think this was something that Governor Wolf said he supported, so we'll see next month if he wants to put it inside his budget and see how everyone reacts to it. I'm
looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the budget fight. Sean, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for the update.
Yep. Have a good one, Rick.
Thanks so much, Sean Kitchen, our Capitol reporter. You can check out his reports at thericksmithshow.com. We'll make sure we get some stuff up there. No, I mean, the reality of this is pre-K should something absolutely be part of, and it should just be part of the school year. I think we should, things are to the point now where it should be just part of, it's what we do. It's now pre-K through 12, or I actually think pre-K through 18. That to me would be the right thing to do. The 2 years of community college the president wants, just make that pre-K through 14. Simple stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
I was born in the USA.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers say that the oil refinery strike at 9 facilities in Texas, California, and Kentucky is about safe staffing levels, and wages are not the primary focus. Tom Conway is a vice president with USW International.
This strike is about safe staffing levels inside the refineries and staffing levels of our maintenance workforces and having safe and reliable and efficient staffing in the refineries. And the situation that exists today just has become unacceptable. We have people who are working 12, 14, 16, 18 continuous days without a day off on 12-hour shifts, and people are stressed with an amazing amount of overtime and fatigue and sleep deprivation. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous way to run an operation like a fuel refinery.
Conway says the USW didn't want the strike and is ready to immediately return to the bargaining table.
We didn't seek this strike. We're not looking for it, but we need problem solved, and just an intransigent attitude from them isn't going to get us there. It's not going to solve the problem. So hopefully they look at these in a genuine way and come back and are willing to sit with us and have an honest discussion about how do we make sure we have a well-trained, adequate workforce. They don't seem to us to be difficult discussions that a management should be so unwilling to have with its workforce.
The United Steelworkers represent workers at 65 U.S. oil refineries that produce about 64% of the country's refined oil. The USW was in negotiations with Shell Oil as part of a national pattern bargaining process when Shell walked away from the labor talks, triggering the strike. U.S. Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez says the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2014 union membership report underscores the value of labor unions for workers. Perez says the report confirms what we've always known, that belonging to a union makes a powerful difference in people's lives, providing greater economic security and helping them punch their ticket to the middle class, according to Perez. The report says non-union workers earn just 79% of what union workers make, a difference of about $10,000 a year for union members. The report also showed that for women, being in a union means that salaries are closer to their male counterparts than those of non-union women. Perez says unions and the right to collectively bargain are more vital now than ever. Perez says when unions are strong, working families thrive and wages rise with productivity. But when union density declines, there's downward pressure on wages.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
So here it is. Tom Tillis, one of my new favorite senators, a Republican from North Carolina. Evidently, he was doing a Q&A at the Bipartisan Policy Center on Monday. You got to love that, the Bipartisan Center. But he was doing this Q&A, and someone had, said, hey, we're the most over-regulated nation in the world or something. He's telling this story. And what caught my attention is he's one of the guys who says, he doesn't think that companies or he thinks that companies should be able to opt out of making their employees wash their hands, which is just one of these weird little, why would you get in the middle of that? Because he said if they post a sign that says their employees don't have to wash their hands, the quote-unquote free market will take care of it. And I just kind of left shaking my head going, really? Are we going that far? Yet I seem to remember, and I do, that the Department of Labor wanted to post a sign that said workers have the right to organize, and guys like this went ape ballistic crazy. Post, I don't know, just very weird. Anyway, recently the anti-vaxxers have flared up again, and the Rand Paul, Chris Christie stuff just driving me insane, which is why I've asked Craig Harrington. He's a researcher over at Media Matters for America to come talk to us about this and what's going on. Craig, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure. I don't think I can get over the fact that Tom Tillis is an advocate of not washing your hands in the bathroom.
Yeah, have you seen this? I mean, it's just nuts to me, this idea that, well, if you have to post a sign that they don't, then people won't come. It's really kind of convoluted and just dumb.
Doesn't it kind of remind you of what we heard Ron and then Rand Paul saying about the unnecessary burden of like civil rights legislation? Consumers can always choose not to go to an establishment that refuses certain types of people based on their skin color or orientation or whatever else.
Like we used to.
Yeah, like the good old days.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea, this love affair, this fetish kind of idea of this idealized free market, it just kind of worries me when you've got people sitting in our halls of power making decisions that affect us all, when you got somebody who's clearly twisted, in my view.
Yeah, and like you said, in the lead-in, these are the same people who, if you were to post a notice letting employees know about their right to organize and their right to seek and establish unions, they would go ballistic.
And they did, because I remember it. It was insane. But my problem with all of this is you've got these people who are this believer of the free market and I should have choice and me, and the hell with everybody else, which brings us to this whole anti-vaccination thing, which I got to be honest, and I will tell the truth. At the very beginning, about 10 years ago, when my kids were being born and having to get these vaccines, I was questioning. But then I sat down, had a conversation with my doctor, and my doctor kind of explained it. And then I didn't buy into the insanity. It seems the insanity has gone from the far left now to the crazy right.
Yeah, and basically, for a little background on the anti-vax movement, for anyone who might not be brought up to speed, this all started from a very small study, a study published in 1998 that reviewed 12 children, and it concluded, or the author concluded, the study actually didn't conclude this. The author just made this statement during a press event talking about his report. The author concluded that it was dangerous for parents to have their children vaccinated with these combination vaccinations because he thought that his evidence showed that vaccinations would lead to autism. In the past 17 years, there have been meta-analysis of that very claim done by dozens of research institutes all around the world, in countries all around the world. We've seen hundreds of thousands of children involved in some of these analyses that add up to millions of cases, and they find no evidence whatsoever that vaccines lead to autism. But when this got started, and it really picked up as one of the first major internet myths, there was all misinformation, there was all noise, and there was very little fact-checking. Right. And so it got stuck in this sort of echo chamber. It started out on the very far left and the very far right. And now it's become a sort of mantra that's bubbled up into mainstream conservative outlets. We had Fox News, Sean Hannity last night saying, I don't want Barack Obama telling me to vaccinate my kids. And then you have Rand Paul a few days ago. And Eric Hananoki actually just published on Media Matters about this today. Rand Paul is part of the InfoWars crowd that worries that the government might begin mandatory vaccinations under martial law. And then you have right-wing radio host Laura Ingraham also coming out virulently against vaccinations because she swears that there's a connection between autism and vaccination. And she said this today. She had Donald Trump on her radio show saying this today. And all of a sudden, this has become a major issue for them.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I really want good, sound medical advice, I go to Donald Trump.
Right.
Come on. I mean, what's wrong with us? What is wrong with us when, look, like I said from the beginning, I went and I sat down with my doctor and he walked me through it and gave me things to read and, helped me along in it. Because, look, at the very beginning, Robert Kennedy Jr.'s claims that the mercury and the thimerosal and all that stuff, something made a little bit of sense to me. So then I go and I look at it. One, they took the mercury out of it, from as I understand, so it's not even there anymore. But, I went to my doctor and got actual information from somebody who that's what they do. I didn't go to Laura Ingraham. I didn't go to Alex Jones. I definitely didn't go to Donald Trump. And I'm certainly not going to go to Rand Paul. What's wrong with us as a society when we get talking heads giving us medical advice?
Right. And I mean, Rand Paul, to his credit, has a medical degree, but to his discredit, his medical degree is in ophthalmology.
Yeah,
and he's a self-certified doctor. And that became a big issue in 2010 when he was running for the Senate and people found out that he had potentially been practicing without a medical license for a number of years, or without a valid medical license because he's certified by his own medical board that he heads. So these aren't the people that you want to look to for vaccine advice. There are people who make vaccines. There are people who investigate vaccines. There are research institutes that have nothing to do with vaccines, that just do independent research. And there are places like Media Matters where you can go to find compilations of the research to correct misinformation. But right-wing radio isn't a source for medical news, but it is for a lot of people, and we've seen that in the last few days and really few hours.
Yeah.
Just this morning, Laura Ingraham was complaining that she thought this was a mainstream media conspiracy meant to weed out conservative presidential candidates and basically set up Jeb Bush because he'd be the only person who wasn't silly enough to mention that he's an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, you wouldn't mention it. And this is the thing. I got to be honest with you. To me, this is kind of a litmus test. And maybe on a certain level, she's a little right. If you're crazy enough to come out and say that this is that we're not vaccinating, and I got to be honest, I don't want you in the Oval. I don't even want you near the Oval Office. I don't even want you on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Just yesterday, Laura Ingraham was claiming that her show sort of represents the voice of the conservative American people, and that Jeb Bush is unwilling to go on her show, and therefore he's unwilling to face tough questions. And if he can't face tough questions from Laura Ingraham, how can he face tough questions as President of the United States? And then today, she complains that presidential candidates are being asked tough questions about where they stand on very basic, fundamental, proven science.
Well, Craig,
she pretends that it's a conspiracy.
Craig, you got to understand, this gig, sitting in this chair that I sit in, the one she sits in, it really is about, hey, look at me. And she's got to make it look like she's the center of the universe.
Exactly.
And she's not. I mean, look, we're talking crazy. We're talking out on the fringe. And people that listen to that, I got to be honest, I fear that the fringe is becoming mainstream, and this kind of thought, or I shouldn't even say thought, because this isn't even thought. This is just regurgitating some bad idea that someone put it into your ear without actually doing research. I've read a couple of the stories, and I'll be honest, when my kids were being vaccinated, I wanted to know what they were. I wanted to know what the 3 shots were. I wanted to make sure that they were safe, as all parents would do.
Right.
And in looking at crazy fake news on Fox, you've got, on one hand, you've got Sean Hannity, who I don't want the president telling me, but you've also got this Megyn Kelly, who I'm not a big fan of, saying, look, I've got 3 kids. They were all vaccinated on time, as the doctor prescribed. Nothing was delayed. She said, sometimes we need Big Brother to make sure that we don't all get sick.
Right. And, it's interesting, just this morning when Laura Ingraham went on her second anti-vaccination rant in as many days, she and Donald Trump concluded that this vaccine science and the people who are saying that this is settled, they're just like the global warmists, the people who believe that climate change is settled science. And that really tells you that, there's a certain amount of preaching to the choir here. You know, Laura Ingraham thinks that Jeb Bush is avoiding tough questions so long as she's the one asking the questions and so long as his answers are what she thinks he should be saying out loud. She thinks that global warming is this vast conspiracy by, scientific researchers who are making $90 grand a year, not by oil companies that are making $35 billion of virtually tax-free petroleum profits every year. It's the scientists who are struggling to make ends meet. She thinks that the vaccine movement or the proof of vaccine science is just as much of a hoax as the proof of global warming science and climate science. And that's just, it shows you the level that it's just become an echo chamber. Everyone who goes into the conservative echo chamber, into that conservative media space, they go in with these preconceived notions. They already have foregone conclusions, and then they just find themselves talking in circles.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me is there's a whole movement in this country of the I believe crowd. Don't show me facts, be damned. I believe. And as long as you can say I believe, you're never wrong.
Right. It's the same thing you see when people push any kind of conspiracy theory. There are lots of people who say you'll never convince me that the government wasn't involved in 9/11, or you'll never convince me that there wasn't a vast conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. And once someone says, you're never going to convince me of something,
stop talking and move on.
Right. then it's basically just the same thing as any kind of religious zeal. You're never going to get through to someone about something that they believe with a kind of zealotry that is fundamental to their character. If it's a central facet of what makes them conservative, if denying vaccine science is what you need to be the president of to be the presidential nominee of the Conservative Party, of the Republican Party, this go around, that's apparently how it is. That must be the litmus test.
That's weird. I'm not a huge Hillary Clinton fan. She'd be better than any of the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs I've seen thus far on the right. But I liked her tweet. The science is clear, she wrote. The earth is round, the sky is blue, and vaccines work.
Right. And she actually said something about grandma knows best in the tweet. And I saw someone who was complaining, saying, that grandma knows best, framing herself as a grandmother. That's almost something that a Republican would do. And it sort of reminded me of the kind of veiled sexist and ageist attacks that only Hillary Clinton has to face. Mitt Romney's 7 or 8 months older than Hillary Clinton. If he had won in 2012, no one would have been making fun of him for being old in 2016 or being a grandfather. But yeah, I mean, she came out and definitively said, like, go get your kids vaccinated. It's safe. And Barack Obama just recently said, take your kids to get vaccinated. It's safe. And we have a measles outbreak in this country for the first time in like 50 years, specifically because certain communities, ideologically left and ideologically right, are refusing to vaccinate their kids. They lack that herd immunity, and now they're getting sick, and they're endangering themselves and other children. So, you should have your kids vaccinated. Vaccines have worked so well that we've forgotten how terrible the diseases are that they virtually eradicated.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I had them all. I had the mumps, the chicken pox, all of that stuff. Now, my kids, fortunately, they don't get that.
Right.
And that's a good thing. My question then, and I know you're not a doctor, but from what you've read and what you've seen, what happens to those of us who have been vaccinated or who have had the disease in the past and built up something of an immunity? If you have people who haven't been vaccinated, what happens to the rest of us once we get past that, down low enough on that herd immunity that it actually could be an outbreak? I mean, in Arizona, their Department of Health was seriously concerned that the Super Bowl could be a place where it explodes, which is insane to me.
Well, the problem is that something like the measles is just so virulent. The National Institutes of Health actually recently published an update to its measles vaccine information because of the recent outbreak that started they believe it started in Anaheim, California at Disneyland, potentially with a foreign tourist who hadn't been vaccinated and who might have been a latent carrier of the measles. The real problem is just that it's so virulent. If you haven't been vaccinated, if you're a child who's too young to receive the vaccine, or if you're someone who has immune disorders where you can't receive vaccines like that, if you're exposed to the measles, there's a 90% chance of you contracting the measles. And this is from the National Institutes of Health.
Wow.
So the problem it's not necessarily for people who have had it and beat it, or for people who are vaccinated. They're probably going to be safe. Their immune systems have been built up to it, at least according to the National Institutes of Health. The problem is that there are a lot of people who haven't been vaccinated for a number of reasons, and those people are absolutely at risk. You have a 90% chance of contracting the measles if you're exposed to the measles. That's a level much higher than the contraction rate of exposure to Ebola, which we don't have a vaccine for. And people spend much more time around Ebola patients and not getting contracting Ebola. And yet, when you looked at CNN, they were wall-to-wall with Ebola coverage for 3 weeks. Where's their wall-to-wall coverage of the measles? There are like hundreds of children who have the measles for the first time in 60 years. We have more kids with the measles this year, or rather in 2014, than there had been for like a decade and a half combined before that. 2015 is on twice the pace of 2014. Wow. This is epic proportions. This is an epidemic. We treated Ebola like the sky was falling. We're treating the measles like nothing is happening at all.
Yeah, and it's right here in our backyard. It's the other part of it. So last question I have for you then, wouldn't the right wing, and if you prescribe to this idea that we shouldn't vaccinate and it's my choice, isn't this how we thin the herd?
Well, gosh, I hope not. It's certainly how you thin. It's certainly how you can thin the right wing ranks of their presidential candidates, because if they're willing to all come out against vaccinations, that's a great weed out question for your first date with any Republican presidential candidate. Ask them where they stand on basic science like vaccines and climate change, and you're going to get rid of them immediately. We've seen something like 70 to 75% of voters, millennial voters, will immediately disqualify anyone who denies the science of climate change. If you can get anywhere near that kind of percentage with voters for denying the science of vaccines, that's great, because that means that these far-right candidates aren't going to move very far. But I hope that it's really not that bad. I hope that it's just a couple of people. I hope that, Chris Christie misspoke and is really in favor of vaccines. I hope that Rand Paul and the rest of them will come out in favor of vaccines, because they're very influential people, and they're the kind of people who can get hundreds, thousands of their followers to not vaccinate their kids, and that creates a real problem.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. Craig, I appreciate you giving us an update and telling us what's going on. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Craig Harrington, researcher over at Media Matters for America. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Let us get old. Don't let us get stupid, all right. Just make us be brave. Make us play nice. Let us be together tonight.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. During the past year, there have been many stories of students walking out of public schools to protest the practices of community policing. This tactic has deep roots in the civil rights movement. On this day in labor history, the year was 1964, which saw nearly 500,000 African American and Puerto Rican students in New York City participating in a one-day school boycott. In addition to nearly half of the public school student population taking to the streets, thousands of demonstrators staged peaceful rallies across the city, gathering at the Board of Education, City Hall, and Governor Nelson Rockefeller's Manhattan office. The purpose of the boycott was to protest segregation and the poor conditions of many schools in black neighborhoods. Bayard Rustin, one of the main architects of the 1963 March on Washington, helped local parents and community groups plan the highly successful event. The massive action drew attention from the national media. The boycott's coordinators approached the United Federation of Teachers, the city's teachers union, for an endorsement of the action. The union, however, declined, although many teachers did individually support the effort. Despite the success of the action, the school board remained unwilling to change its policies. After the 1964 boycotts did not bring about the change that they had hoped, Rustin and many of the local black organizers of the protest went their different ways. Rustin closely aligned himself with the UFT. He hoped to use the union's power to build a labor civil rights coalition to effect change. Other members of the boycott coalition turned to black community power. They advocated for black community control of local schools. These different tactics resulted in lingering tensions between black activists and the teachers' union that would help to shape New York's politics for the decades that followed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Absence works. Maybe it's the way it's being taught or the way that it's being applied out there. But the fact of the matter is, it is the best form of to teach our children.
I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl. I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl.
Yes, one of the. I hope Rick Perry throws his hat back into the ring here in 2016. Really do. Because abstinence works. It's just that we're not applying it right. Like vaccines work evidently, but unless you don't get them, which is just kind of nuts to me. And then I should say, let me be very clear. In Rick Perry's defense, he is not, at least as far as I understand, completely out on the deep end on the Vaxer issue. He did propose and put forth a law in Texas, as I understand it, that people get the HPV vaccination, that young girls get that so that they don't end up dying of cervical cancer and who knows what else. That's a good thing. Maybe that will push Rick Perry to the front of the crazy pack. Just a thought. Anyway, welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I go back to this whole anti-vaxxer thing, and as I've said a number of times, to be honest, I was at the beginning, about 10, 12 years ago, when my daughter was born, I was thinking about it. And I'd heard Robert Kennedy Jr. going on about how there's mercury in the thimerosal, which causes autism, which I know mercury is a neurotoxin, and it's something that could possibly, it seemed rational. It seemed like an article that, it seemed like something that was possible. So I sat down with my doctor and I said, I'm not comfortable with this. At which point he told me, well, there's no mercury in it anymore. They don't do that anymore. They've kind of changed it and blah, blah, blah. So my doctor I trust, and I have a very good relationship. We have a good family doctor who I adore, and I wish everybody had the kind of relationship that we have with our family doctor. I trust him emphatically. I do. He's got the rightful, in my view, the right philosophy. But I also don't trust big pharma. I also don't trust, some of the government-run, the company-run government agencies that oversee this stuff. So I can see how one would go, I'm not going to have this happen to my kids. I can see that. So to me, it's not about government or bad government. It's about I can see where people are coming from, and like I said, it took me that time to go, all right, well, I need to make sure that my ducks are in a row, that I actually pay attention to this stuff and I look it up and I do my homework. And when I got to that, I found that, some of the people, especially on the far left, were very angry that, you would start talking about the fact stuff. Well, there have been studies done, yes, but, there have been other studies, lots of them, that show the other side of this. And what's frustrating to me, and look, I understand the conspiracy. I understand being fearful of these big vaccine companies. For instance, you can't sue a vaccine company. If you remember back in 1986, thank you, Ronald Reagan and a bunch of corporate Democrats, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act basically made it to where you can't sue them. You end up getting compensation through a fund that they set up for people who are injured by vaccines. Because look, there is a risk of anything. If I poke you in the arm with a needle today, if I take a dart and I poke you in the arm with it, there's a chance that you can get an infection and you can die from that. There's always that chance. There's always a possibility that something like that is going to happen. It's just part of how things are. So when people say, "Well, I got autism from this shot," I don't know. The research says probably not, but we've got to make people whole. What's also interesting to me, and you may remember this back when they were creating the Department of Homeland Security, another moment where I kind of go, the anti-vaccine people have a leg to stand on. There were a bunch of lawsuits, and it was Robert Kennedy Jr.'s doing a bunch of lawsuits against Eli Lilly for the use of this thimerosal. And this made a whole bunch of congressional staffers really very wealthy. And again, it just stinks to high heaven, and it is what it was. And this is part of what the conspiracy nuts cite. As part of the Homeland Security bill, they tucked in a little piece in the 475-page legislation, a couple paragraphs, that basically exempted Eli Lilly and the vaccine companies from being sued. Because, we need to have it for Homeland Security to make sure that our people are safe. So we got to protect this industry. So you can't sue. And it basically wiped away thousands of lawsuits that, would have gone through the court system, and who knows where they would have gone. But it basically wiped it away, and the stock price went skyrocketing up. And, people in Bill Frist's office, the doctor who his family owns billions of dollars worth of hospitals, him. It's reported, it's my understanding from the reports that I've read, that it was his office that was part of putting that in, along with, I think, James Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin. I'm not 100% on that. But if my recollection is right, that's right about where it was. And they tucked this in, and it passed through, nobody read it. It was on page 474, and who knew? But it protects these big companies from lawsuits. I then I get the radical side of this. But I go back to my conversations with my doctor. I go back to the research that I've done. And this is where the I believe crowd loses me. I get it. You believe.
but there's nothing to back it up other than I believe. And what scares me is you've got the I believe crowd, who it's much easier to say I believe than it is to do the heavy lifting of research and looking and investigating stuff and maybe even having a conversation with your doctor. I believe is so much easier. But in the process, you're making my kids at risk. You're making me at risk, my family at risk. And I have a problem with that, as I think most people do. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes, they stay united, always hand in hand. Working class heroes, with hearts of gold, they'll always shine so bright.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Last time we discussed the complexity of the Roosevelt family in America. Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt were active in politics, but it was Theodore Roosevelt's son that was being groomed to follow in his father's footsteps. Like his father, he was elected to the New York Assembly, and just like his father, he served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Theodore Roosevelt had also been governor of New York, so that was next for Junior. When Theodore Jr. announced his candidacy for governor, Franklin was suffering from polio and his future was uncertain. But Eleanor surprisingly opposed Theodore's campaign, and in the end, Theodore lost. It was the beginning of the FDR shadow creeping over Teddy Roosevelt Jr. It was a shadow he would remain in until he and Franklin both, in a way, went out in a blaze of glory. Join us next time for more about the complicated Roosevelt family. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future, controls the present now, controls the past, controls the past now, controls the future, controls the present now. Now testify.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So as I said earlier, I'm watching the Super Bowl, and I see this ad that just pretty much stops everybody in the room. Look, on one hand, I remember during the season, they ran the domestic violence ads in the NFL, which I didn't get. I don't understand why it's hard to talk about. To me, it's never been hard. You don't do it. But as I'm watching this ad and I'm watching this code call, and for those who didn't see it, there's a woman who calls 911 to order a pizza. And the 911 operator, to his credit, walks through and realizes this isn't just about ordering a pizza. There's something going on. And I'm thinking about it and going, is this a good thing during the Super Bowl, which is one of the highest domestic violence days of the year? Is this a good thing to give this away? So I've had a number of conversations with folks, and I go, you know what? I need to get an expert, which is why we've asked Peg Durker. She's the executive director of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Peg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Pleasure to be here.
So I look at this, and I got to be honest. I'm torn. I'm split right down the middle. Is this a bad idea to give away the code, or is this a good idea to educate women that there's a code to have?
Well, I think it's fantastic, really, because victims need to know that they're supported, and folks who are abusing need to know that there are people on the other end of the line that are going to listen and call for help. We were really excited to see that so many of the Super Bowl viewers also thought it was terrific. in the TiVo poll. This came in second only to the Budweiser ad with the lost dog. So, as you said, people were watching and quieting down during their parties to really figure out what was going on. In the USA Today ad meter, 14 out of 60 viewers ranked this as one of their favorites. So, I think the NFL deserves a lot of kudos for, again, showing that they're going to have a long-term commitment to really changing the way that domestic violence is viewed and understood.
Now, in your opinion, is this what came out of the Ray Rice thing? I mean, is this the, because I got to be honest, ever since the Ray Rice thing took on, I didn't understand the NFL's ads. Maybe it's just me. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I don't understand the choking up. And to me, it's very easy to talk about. You just don't do it. And look, I've always been in the mindset, if someone ever hit my daughters, it'd be the end of them. You just don't allow it to happen. And I think if we had a society that thought more like that, maybe this wouldn't be as much of a problem.
Well, maybe not, but people who abuse aren't born monsters. There is something that our culture does to men, because men perpetrate almost all the abuse, that promotes a culture where violence is tolerated and violence against women is tolerated even more. So domestic violence and sexual assault are epidemics in our country. We know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience some form of physical violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other types of abuse in their lifetime. And what's really sad is 1 in 3 young adults report experiencing some form of physical, sexual, emotional, or other kinds of abuse from a dating partner. And they wait 6 months before they tell anybody.
Why do you think that is? I mean, to me, look, I watched the video, the Ray Rice video, and I got to be honest, I'm in the category of people going, why would there be a next day with that person? The second someone treats me poorly, smack me, whatever, that's the last day. And I guess that's just maybe my simplistic view of it, but I don't understand how this stuff gets to that level.
It's insidious. And abuse happens over a long period of time, and the dynamic is very complex. And if it has risen to the level of physical violence, then surely people have been isolated from family and friends who could help them. They may have been cut off from all economic resources that would allow them to escape, and could really be under threat not only for their own physical safety, but often what we see is the abuser is threatening the life of children, of their children, as well as their other family members. So there is quite a bit of pressure and real life consequences for people when they escape. And that's why if someone is being abused, really encourage them to talk to a domestic violence program who can help them with safety planning so that they can do it safely.
Yeah, because we see far too many reports of a former partner or former dating partner, husband, whatever, coming back and killing somebody in the workplace, or it just seems to me to be just kind of insane.
Yeah.
And how do we protect them? I mean, how as a society do we protect them? Are laws adequate? Are they too lax? I mean, you see the restraining orders, and I have some police friends who say, basically those restraining orders are just basically we know who to go look at after something's happened.
Well, yeah, 40,000 people in Pennsylvania every year file for protection from abuse orders. So they're one important tool, but they're not the only tool. Right. We're also working with police across the state, including in the Capital Region, in both Cumberland and Dauphin County, to implement a new protocol where they can really screen victims right on the scene of a domestic violence call to see if they're at high likelihood to being killed, and hook that person up with safety planning resources right away. And hopefully we will decrease the number of deaths. But we have good laws. They need to be consistently applied. People have to be able to talk about it and reach out for services. And we have to hold the abusers accountable.
No, I'm right there with you. But, I go back to the Super Bowl ad, and my thought,
And it was, on one of the worst domestic violence, and I may be wrong. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, that, Super Bowl day is one of the worst domestic violence days because, anytime you add liquor and high expectations of one way or another, it's a recipe for disaster in my view.
Well, there is a lot of debate about whether the Super Bowl Sunday is it, but certainly things get wound up and where violence is present, it'll be more exacerbated in a context of alcohol, and celebrating a game where physical violence is endemic to it. But what we're really hoping is that this starts a conversation among men about how they can hold each other accountable, because men commit most of the violence, even against other men. And so women aren't going to end domestic violence, and that's really our goal, to end domestic violence for the next generation. We need the men to stand up, to really talk about how being a strong man doesn't mean physical violence and power and control. Talk to their sons, to other young guys that they mentor, through athletic leagues or Boy Scouts, what have you, about how to be a strong, good man, and to have really positive, equitable relationships.
So if someone if someone's in one of these situations, and I don't want to give away all of the information because I know that a lot of stuff you guys keep close to the vest because, a safety plan is just that, a way to keep people safe. How would someone get in touch with you outside of making a code call like we heard during the Super Bowl ad? What advice would you give the folks who may be in situations that are less than safe?
Sure. At our website, www.pcadv, Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence.org, you can find help in any county. There are 60 domestic violence programs and sexual assault programs across the state, helping people in all 67 counties. We work with more than 85,000 Pennsylvanians every year.
And if someone wanted to help, because I understand, I got to understand you guys are under huge financial constraints. If people wanted to help out, is there a way for folks to get involved in helping outside of, being a victim, being someone who wants to help?
Absolutely. Folks could sponsor conversations or educational programs in their various clubs or churches, workplace settings. They can volunteer at a local domestic violence program. And certainly if folks are really overcommitted on, in terms of time, they can always donate so that we can make these services available to more and more people.
There you go. And we'll make sure we get a link to your website, which is pcadv.org. We'll just put a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Peg Durker's name. It'll take you right there. Let me go back for a second. Last line of questioning I've got for you. In looking at the Ray Rice thing, because, we've seen these stories pop up, and there are always people like me, because, again, I don't understand why you would stay. Because I don't want to make it about the victim here, because at the end of the day, the woman who was assaulted, she was the victim in this. But I guess I just don't understand why you would stay in that kind of a relationship. It just blows my mind.
Again, women in these relationships are often and usually under a great deal of threat, including even their life and the life of their children. And we see abusers make good on those homicide threats every single day. And again, they've been restricted from working, restricted from other financial means. It's often a choice between their kids being homeless or them not being around their kids to also protect their kids from the abuser, because we often see that someone who abuses their spouse also abuses the children in the home. So, again, it's very complex,
right?
And I think we can't judge from the outside.
Yeah. Well, did the NFL do the right thing with Rice?
The NFL certainly, I think, stumbled in the execution, but the right thing to do is to hold Ray Rice accountable.
There you go. Peg, I appreciate you taking time for us and helping me work through some of this as I continue to question my thoughts on it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Peg Durker's executive director of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We've got a link to their website at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Peg's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
This is Your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Escalating violence in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula has convinced Egyptian authorities to expand a planned buffer zone to be cleared along the border with Gaza. On Sunday, 3 women were killed following a shelling attack and a firefight between security forces and militants calling themselves Sinai Province. That group isn't talked about much in the West, but they're responsible for a growing number of incidents in Egypt, including coordinated attacks last Thursday that left at least 30 soldiers dead. Sinai Province has pledged its allegiance to the Islamic State and was previously supportive of al-Qaeda after it began operations in 2011. Following recent attacks, Egypt will now widen that buffer zone with Gaza to 3 miles, distance that would encompass the entirety of the ancient city of Rafah, which has served as a checkpoint into Palestine. That was Russian President Vladimir Putin at a signing ceremony for the Eurasian Economic Union last year, saying that, quote, "Wherever I go and whomever I meet, everyone wants to know how to establish relations with the new Eurasian Union." But that might not be the case anymore, if it ever was. Belarus, along with Armenia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, is partnered with Russia in that union. It's a regional customs bloc. Well, that's good in times of prosperity. The crisis in Ukraine has hurt the Russian economy and the economy of Belarus by extension. Direct disagreement between the frequent allies has also been touched off after Russia banned food exports from Belarus after it was found to be trading with countries that backed sanctions on Moscow. Now, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has gone a step further, threatening to leave the group if there isn't a resolution over that disagreement. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
It's always interesting to see Congress in action, though interesting can also be appalling. For example, what a sight it is to watch Republican leaders as they gleefully try to repeal Obamacare, the law extending health care coverage to all Americans. As they vote one by one to kill it, their mantra is no to big government health care. What you can't see, however, is them later slipping down the hallways of the Capitol to a little-known exclusive medical office that gives them free health care, paid for by the same big government they were just ranting about. You might think that such raw hypocrisy would cause them to feel at least a twinge of moral discomfort, but apparently they've been immunized to prevent such outbreaks of morality. A good illustration of the congressional mindset is presently making the rounds on the internet. Called The Haircut, it tells the story of a barber who cut the hair of a florist, but refused to take payment from the flower peddler. "I'm doing community service this week," he explained. The next morning, when the barber went to his shop, he found a thank you note and a dozen roses at his door. His next customer was a police officer needing a trim. Again, the barber declined any payment. The next morning, he found a thank you note and a dozen donuts waiting for him, a gift from the grateful cop. Then, lo and behold, a congressman came in for a haircut. When he tried to pay, the barber once more waved off the money, repeating his commitment to community service. The lawmaker was delighted by this generous gesture. And sure enough, when the barber went to his shop the next morning, he was greeted by another surprise. A dozen Congress critters lined up waiting for a free haircut. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, it's just a matter of one's moral makeup, assuming, of course, that you have a moral makeup.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future. Controls the present now, controls the past. Controls the past now, controls the future. Controls the present now. Now testify.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, I think about this, and look, it's one of those issues that honestly I get angry about because I don't understand it. I don't understand a guy who raises his hand to a woman. You just don't do it. If it gets to that, you leave. I just don't understand it, and I don't understand a culture that would allow something like that to happen. I personally would never, if my friends, anybody I knew, wouldn't stand for it. And if it were one of my kids, and I think this is one of those things that's just kind of frustrating, that as a society, at least I think in my way of thinking, that it wouldn't happen because this is something that families protect their children for. But you know, as Peg pointed out, it's one of those statistics that really is scary. Honestly and truthfully, it's very scary that only 1 in 3 report it, and then it's months after the fact that it happens. And, you know, I've got 2 daughters. Part of my big fear, they're moving into those, my oldest one, who's 12, she's moving into those years where, you know, she's going to be dating and, you know, what does that lead into? And you can't protect your kids all the time, but you've got to make sure that they know that there's a support network around them, that if it were to ever happen, there would be someone there. But, you know, Peg also hit on something else that, you know, people who've explained it to me have pointed out that, you know, the isolation, the separation from family, being dependent, all of those things lead to this kind of accepted behavior, which, you know, I'm hoping, you know, like I said, my daughters are eventually going to get to the dating and marriage and all of that stuff. And I fear, I honestly and truthfully fear what potential is in the future. And maybe it's just me. But, you know, I've had two situations that I've come across domestic violence. I mean, it was right in my face, and you couldn't help but deal with it. Once I was in high school. I think I was a junior going into senior, and it was the summertime, and we were in the park, and we had a beer ball, which is another reason why I'm against all the privatization of the wine and spirit shops. But anyway, here we are, you know, 16, 17 years old, drunk out of our minds. And I can say that because the statute of limitations is over. And again, the reason I'm against privatization. Don't want my kids doing that. But, you know, there's a car in the park, you know, over there, you know, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And the car there's noises coming from the car that you wouldn't expect to hear. Screams of pain. And, you know, a bunch of us walked over and, you know, hey, what's going on? And this guy is just beating the tar out of this girl. And, you know, we grabbed him, drug him through the window and, you know, started, you know, teaching him to be a citizen. You know, as the old man said, you know, sometimes you need a smack up beside the back of the head to make a citizen on you. And that's what we were doing. We're making a citizen out of him. And that's when the park ranger pulled up. And we went through this whole story. You know, we heard this, and, you know, the cop knew, and the park ranger knew we were bombed. And, you know, he hears our story, which is, you know, we heard this and we pulled the guy out, and we're teaching him the lessons of life. And the girl who's bleeding says that she had tripped in the woods. And this is brilliant that she could think of this quickly on her feet. She tripped in the woods, and the boyfriend was taking her to the hospital when we stopped him in the middle of nowhere and just started beating the tar out of him, of which the cop didn't believe. But it's one of those moments where you go, how do you get into those situations? I mean, this was just a young girl. I mean, she was, you know, 17, 18, tops, making excuses already. And I got to wonder if there's something in that. And then a number of years later, I had volunteered as a big brother, and the mother of the kid, you know, evidently liked to, and I hate putting it that way, but every boyfriend she ever had beat her. And it occurred to me that it's that roller coaster that, you know, she'll put up with the beatings and all of the abuse for the euphoria of the highs, the makeup, the I'm sorry's, the all the attention, all of that stuff. And, you know, it really was very frustrating because I couldn't change that dynamic. Now, what I did do is I had again another conversation with someone
while his head was pinned to the bumper of my truck, saying, look, I can't stop you with her, but if you touch one of those kids, you're mine. Because understand, I grew up in a time and an era and in an environment where you basically smack the hell out of somebody. I mean, I grew up fighting. I grew up, that's just how things were done. And I'm told that's probably not the best way, but there's part of me that goes, maybe it is. Maybe there is a certain segment of the population that only understands a good smack up the side of the head. And I know, Rick, you're being obnoxious. It's not good. No, maybe it's not. And maybe that's part of my journey towards learning that maybe there's a better way, but maybe there's not. I've often said, when little kids used to fight in the schoolyard, they learned to be decent to each other. You didn't have little smart mouths getting away with all this stuff who then grow up to be big smart mouths who cause all these problems. Society worked a lot better when you learned who was in the sandbox. Instead of all of this, and look, I've always been against the anti-bullying stuff. Yep, put me down. Because as a society, you have, as a citizen of a society, you have to figure out how to deal with those bullies. Because it doesn't end when you get out of school. It doesn't end during summer recess. It doesn't end when you become an adult. It just takes on a different form, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. And I see this kind of the same vein. While it will be scary for me when my daughters date and marry and do all of those things, there's still there's still opportunities for them to live very fruitful, happy lives. But at the end of it, I think all of us should want the same thing for our kids. That they live safe, happy lives. Prosperous. Because at the end of the day, I still think all of us, we all agree on the destination in life, where we want to get to. I think the paths are a little different. But I go back and I think about those moments throughout my life that, you kind of go, well, yeah, she was asking for it, which is the worst possible conclusion. And you heard a lot of that with the Ray Rice thing, because I don't understand it. My wife hit me, that's the end. We're moving on. She came at me with a frying pan or a butcher knife or something. We've got some serious problems, and it's time to move along. Someone knocks you out and you marry, I struggle. I really do. And, maybe they're going to be the one couple in 100 million that make it till they're 100 years old. I don't know. But at the end of the day, my asking the question why you would stay is not, as I've gotten a couple of emails pointing out that I'm blaming the victim. I'm not. I feel for the victim. And I think the NFL should have done more sooner. And maybe the culture is going to change. I don't know. But here again, the ads that we've seen through the football season, I didn't understand. I don't understand the choking up. I don't understand the crying. I don't understand that. By having those guys standing there all choked up, not knowing what to say, that there's a problem there. And then the code call, I struggle with it. And I think Peg's right. And I've talked to a number of women today that I've run into, here at the station and in other places, who have given me, enlightened moments that, wow, I didn't even know there was such a thing. Wow, I didn't know. So maybe as an education tool, maybe it's a good thing. But maybe as a part of society, maybe we should be talking about, I don't know, how to make sure that we get people the help that they need and deal with some of those obstacles that Peg Durker's laid out there, to the financial part, the safety, getting along. And maybe, maybe talking about, I don't know, and here it comes. Where are my Second Amendment, folks? Maybe the people who get restraining orders, maybe we take their guns away. Because I know, Rick, guns don't kill people. People kill people. Yes, I know. But the gun helps. It does. I've been told it helps. It's a lot easier than pointing your finger and yelling bang. The only way that works is if you get real bad heart, and that's not in your favor. Anyway, if you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast. You can also watch me flailing my arms here in the studio. We've got the video there. On your smartphone, get the Rick Smith Show app. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Friday, put it on the calendar. We are going to be at Anthony's Micro Pub and Pizza Place Friday at 7:30 after the Keystone Progress speech by Cecile Roberts. A little meet up, rub some elbows, talk, meet, greet, do all of that stuff, and maybe have a beer or two on top of it. Can't wait to see him. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swing.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The United Steelworkers say that the oil refinery strike at 9 facilities in Texas, California, and Kentucky is about safe staffing levels, and wages are not the primary focus. Tom Conway is a vice president with USW International.
This strike is about safe staffing levels inside the refineries and staffing levels of our maintenance workforces and having safe and reliable and efficient staffing in the refineries. And the situation that exists today just has become unacceptable. We have people who are working 12, 14, 16, 18 continuous days without a day off on 12-hour shifts, and people are stressed with an amazing amount of overtime and fatigue and sleep deprivation. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous way to run an operation like a fuel refinery.
Conway says the USW didn't want the strike and is ready to immediately return to the bargaining table.
We didn't seek this strike. We're not looking for it, but we need problem solved, and just an intransigent attitude from them isn't going to get us there. It's not going to solve the problem. So hopefully they look at these in a genuine way and come back and are willing to sit with us and have an honest discussion about how do we make sure we have a well-trained, adequate workforce. They don't seem to us to be difficult discussions that a management should be so unwilling to have with its workforce.
United Steelworkers represent workers at 65 U.S. oil refineries that produce about 64% of the country's refined oil. The USW was in negotiations with Shell Oil as part of a national pattern bargaining process when Shell walked away from the labor talks, triggering the strike. U.S. Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez says the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2014 Union Membership Report underscores the value of labor unions for workers. Perez says the report confirms what we've always known, that belonging to a union makes a powerful difference in people's lives, providing greater economic security and helping them punch their ticket to the middle class, according to Perez. The report says non-union workers earn just 79% of what union workers make, a difference of about $10,000 a year for union members. The report also showed that for women, being in a union means that salaries are closer to their male counterparts than those of non-union women. Perez says unions and the right to collectively bargain are more vital now than ever. Perez says when unions are strong, working families thrive and wages rise with productivity. But when union density declines, there's downward pressure on wages.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Where common sense, reason, and community come together. The Rick Smith Show.
Now, people, because together we will stand, every boy, every girl, and a man.
There's a word that you don't really hear much of on the radical right. The whole idea of being together, community. Working for a common, working forward. No, I don't hear much of that. All I hear is hooray for me and screw you. I shouldn't have to vaccinate my kids just so yours don't get sick. It's insane. Just nuts. It's crazy. And the good thing is it's almost, for progressive, it's Friday, this Friday, or actually Saturday morning. It's almost like Christmas. Bernie is coming to town. So I'm thrilled about that.
In fact, for those who have been long-time listeners of the program here, when Bernie was Congressman Bernie, not Senator Bernie, he used to come on the program all the time. He was probably on the program 15 or 20 times over the years. In fact, the very first guest I ever had on this program. So that's one of those things I'm actually thrilled about. And I'm glad to see Bernie coming to town. And here to talk about the big event and the PA Progressive Summit and all of the workshops and the elbow rubbing and all the baby kissing that's going to go on this weekend. I've got John Newrohr. He's the communications director over at Keystone Progress, the good folks who put this on. John, thanks for taking time for us.
It's great to be with you, Rick. I really appreciate you having me on.
So Bernie's coming to town. That for like I said, for progressives, that's almost like Santa.
Well, Bernie is. There's nobody better to represent the values that organizationally for us at Keystone Progress, but I know the kinds of things that you are fighting for every day on air. There's nobody who's a better spokesperson for the things that we believe in than Senator Bernie Sanders. So we are incredibly excited that he's going to be with us on Saturday morning in Harrisburg. And I want to throw it out there right away as we're talking a little bit about this. There are still some spots available, though they're going fast for the summit this weekend. So there's some events that are happening on Friday night. Bernie kicks off the day on Saturday. If you go to paprogressivesummit.net, you can see the full agenda. You can see all the great workshops, and you can register there still. But we really are. I know that sounds cliched to say, the spots are going fast, but they actually are going fast. We might end up having to close down registration before we even get to Friday. So if you're interested, paprogressivesummit.net is the place to go.
Yeah, I mean, you've got an amazing lineup of headline folks. You've got Cecile Richards, the woman from Planned Parenthood, the Crystal Ball from the MSNBC woman, Patrick Murphy from MSNBC, a big lineup of very beautiful people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Cecile Richards, and Cecile, I was lucky enough to, in a past life, work at America Votes in Washington, D.C., and we have an America Votes affiliate here in Pennsylvania. Cecile Richards, she long ago was one of the co-founders of America Votes, and now is doing incredible work at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And so we're really, really excited to have her. Obviously, women's health and reproductive rights is an issue that, it's really important to us organizationally, but, it's something that is going to be under attack here in Pennsylvania with the new legislature, starting now. And so we're really concerned about, some of the attacks we're going to see to women's health and reproductive rights in the next few months. And we still think that there are some opportunities to do some really good things. And so Cecile will be here on Friday night at 6 o'clock, and she's going to be speaking about that, some of the things to look forward to, and ways we can play offense here in Pennsylvania, but also to talk about some of the the ways that we need to be vigilant and be ready to play defense with a pretty terrible and radically conservative legislature in 2015.
Yeah, the crazy caucus seems to have taken over our General Assembly, which is why we need to be doing more organizing than ever to be able to fight back. And I think this is a great kickoff to the year to be able to do some of those things, and maybe even find some groups that, if you're not currently involved in stuff, come out to the PA Progressive Summit and maybe latch on to some groups that are doing work that are of significant interest.
Absolutely. I think that there are 55, maybe over 55 different workshops and trainings throughout the day on Saturday. We have different tracks for different issue areas. So on communications and message training, on women's health and reproductive rights, on labor issues and economic security. There are so many different issue areas that we have workshops and panels for during the day on Saturday. So whatever your issue is that really is your number one issue, and for us, it's a lot of different issues that we're concerned about. There's something there for you at the summit on Saturday, so we hope the folks can make it out.
And maybe even do like I do. I generally go outside of the issues that are important to me to find something else, to kind of expand what it is that I'm looking at or what I understand. And this is an excellent opportunity to hear people at the top of their game, the experts in these fields, talk about the issues that are important to them. Because I think you need to spread that wealth of information around, which why I always love coming to this thing.
Well, and what we really value, we have there are 4 different breakout session times during the day on Saturday. They're 75-minute sessions, so they're not crazy long. But during those 4 different breakout session times, there are 11 different choices, 11 different rooms that you can go to with different issue areas and different topics. And what's really important for us is that we keep those rooms fairly small. So you're talking about 30 or 40 people that are going to be in a room with you. And, that's important because I've been to tons of conferences, I'm sure that you have too, where you sit in the back of a room with hundreds of people, like a big lecture hall, and you don't feel like you're really engaging. You don't feel like you're part of the discussion. You're sort of being talked to.
Right.
And yeah, you can learn things that way for sure. But the best way to do it and really to jump in and engage on an issue is to be in a small group setting where you're really having a dialogue, where it's a little bit more informal, but you are having a conversation with the people that are presenting and not just being talked to. So that's really important for us. That's a point of emphasis. And that's the way that we've set up every single one of those 55 plus breakout sessions.
Yeah, I've enjoyed them. And in fact, in years past, I'd actually served on a couple of the panels in years past to talk about media and other things that we work on here as well. So there's a whole bunch of different voices and different thoughts as well. But I'm looking forward to it. But for those who will be there Friday, and I want to throw this cheap plug in, we're having a meetup after Cecile Richards' speech, 7:30 at Anthony's Brew Pub and Pizza Place, just down the road from where the Hilton is. Anthony's just down on 2nd Street. A little meetup. We're going to rub elbows with listeners and folks, and we're paired up with our friends at the Raging Chicken Press. So we'll hope to see folks out. Hope to see you out there as well there, John.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And I know that you have always been, Rick, you've had a table in a lot of years at the summit. Another thing that is important to point out is that we have a ton of different partner organizations that are going to have tables in the main hallway outside the main ballroom at the Hilton. And so that's another great way to browse the different issue areas, the different groups that are working on different issue areas, find ways to engage with them, sign up for mailing lists, sign up for opportunities to volunteer with them, and just to hear about some of the great work that these organizations that are partners of ours and we really value them being there are doing across the state.
Yeah, we're gonna come back out and we're gonna do some recording and talk to people, because I like getting out and talking to people face to face, and this is an excellent opportunity to get to know people a little bit and to really to find out what's important to folks. That's what I like about these get-togethers, and you guys always do such a great job. This is the sixth one, as I understand, right?
This is the 6th summit. That's right. So this is I've been involved peripherally in years past. This is actually my first year being on staff at Keystone Progress full time. And I have to give a shout out to our executive director, Michael Morrill, who's been doing this since the beginning. This is his 6th as executive director, and the tremendous amount of work that's going into it with full-time staffers now. There were times when he was doing this as an army of one in years past.
No, so, I remember the first one. It was basically him, and then it was him and Jane, and that was pretty much the end of it. And they've always put on a great show, and we've made it out to all of them. To be able to get out and talk to folks, and I like the fact that we're going to be able to continue. And this year, huge. Bernie's coming to town. I mean, what a good get.
Yeah, Bernie's been doing his tour, and I know, and then this is not this is public information that he's certainly thinking about a presidential run as an independent. And, I would imagine that Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in February is not necessarily the first choice for him to announce that he's running, but you just never know. You just never know, Rick.
You never know. And I'm a huge fan. I would love to see that announcement. I'd love to see him be the guy that pushes Hillary. And actually, I'd love to see him be the guy who gets the nomination. But, here again, he's going to have to then become a Democrat, which I think would be a little difficult. Maybe, who knows? Good socialist, a self-proposed a socialist, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind
So,
of in the line with Dwight Eisenhower.
Well, and if for nothing else, then for him to be a part of the discussion and shifting the narrative on issues, especially income inequality, which is obviously one that he's been going around the country and talking about lately, is a critical issue. And frankly, the other thing that I think people don't realize is that it's an issue that you can win national elections on. I mean, you really can. And I think for so long, that the sort of the inside the Beltway groupthink in D.C. about somebody like Senator Bernie Sanders is, he's just too far outside the mainstream. But when you listen to the kinds of issues that he is bringing up, those are mainstream issues, and that's what people need to realize. So, and we're really excited about, being a stop on the Senator Bernie Sanders tour. We're more than happy to be a stop along the way to hopefully bigger and better things for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, this Friday and Saturday, the 6th and 7th of February, the Keystone Progress, the Pennsylvania Progressive Summit. If you want more information, paprogressivesummit.net. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on John Neuror's name. It'll take you right there. Highly encourage folks to come out. And then on Friday night, after Cecile Richards' speech, come on down to Anthony's Brew Pub and Pizza Place for a little meetup with the Rick Smith Show and the folks at the Raging Chicken Press as we discuss politics. We discuss the issue of the day and maybe have a beer or two. Pretty simple stuff. John, I appreciate you taking time for us. Appreciate the work that you guys do there at Keystone Progress. Keep it up.
Thank you as always, Rick. I appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you and your listeners this weekend.
All righty. Good stuff. John Neuror, Communications Director there at Keystone Progress. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Make his farm no more.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. During the past year, there have been many stories of students walking out of public schools to protest the practices of community policing. This tactic has deep roots in the civil rights movement. On this day in labor history, the year was 1964. Which saw nearly 500,000 African American and Puerto Rican students in New York City participating in a one-day school boycott. In addition to nearly half of the public school student population taking to the streets, thousands of demonstrators staged peaceful rallies across the city, gathering at the Board of Education, City Hall, and Governor Nelson Rockefeller's Manhattan office. The purpose of the boycott was to protest segregation and the poor conditions of many schools in black neighborhoods. Bayard Rustin, one of the main architects of the 1963 March on Washington, helped local parents and community groups plan the highly successful event. The massive action drew attention from the national media. The boycott's coordinators approached the United Federation of Teachers, the city's teachers union, for an endorsement of the action. The union, however, declined, although many teachers did individually support the effort. Despite the success of the action, the school board remained unwilling to change its policies. After the 1964 boycotts did not bring about the change that they had hoped, Rustin and many of the local black organizers of the protest went their different ways. Rustin closely aligned himself with the UFT. He hoped to use the union's power to build a labor civil rights coalition to effect change. Other members of the boycott coalition turned to black community power. They advocated for black community control of local schools. These different tactics resulted in lingering tensions between black activists and the teachers' union that would help to shape New York's politics for the decades that followed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Last time we discussed the complexity of the Roosevelt family in America. Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt were active in politics, but it was Theodore Roosevelt's son that was being groomed to follow in his father's footsteps. Like his father, he was elected to the New York Assembly, and just like his father, he served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Theodore Roosevelt had also been governor of New York, so that was next for Junior. When Theodore Jr. announced his candidacy for governor, Franklin was suffering from polio and his future was uncertain. But Eleanor surprisingly opposed Theodore's campaign, and in the end, Theodore lost. It was the beginning of the FDR shadow creeping over Teddy Roosevelt Jr. It was a shadow he would remain in until he and Franklin both, in a way, went out in a blaze of glory. Join us next time for more about the complicated Roosevelt family. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Guess what? The majority of the American people believe we should have a gold standard, not a paper standard.
Pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows. Pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows. Pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows. Pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows.
I just love that song.
Let's test your knowledge and see what you've learned so far.
Yeah.
What color are the unicorns?
Yay! I just love that song, Pink Fluffy Unicorns. There you go. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I miss Ron Paul. I guess Ron Paul was, you looked at him as like the crazy old uncle. His kid just looks crazy. I mean, with all this anti-vax stuff and all, just wow, way out on the fringe. Anyway, some interesting news. Earlier, I talked about the minimum wage and how Aetna, the big insurance giant, announced that none of their employees were going to make less than $16 an hour. They were setting a $16 an hour minimum wage. Hey, Democrats, look over there. Why aren't you calling for that? No, we want $10 an hour, please. We want $9. If you remember, Obama first started off at $9. And then went up to I think it was $9.50. Oh, they're gonna go. Now the Democrats are settled on $10.10. I would have stuck with $15 or the Aetna number $16. And they found out that it's going to cost Aetna about $25 million in 2016 to do that. But in 2013, they gave their CEO $30 million. So the argument of, well, we can't pay that, we don't have it. Here's an idea: pay the CEO $5 million, give the $30 million to the workers. You broke even. You didn't even have to raise anything. And I still think $5 million is a big ton of money. Just a thought. Interesting story. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Target pulling out of Canada, right? Evidently about 17,500 workers there in Canada now jobless. They're going to collect, according to the report, about $59 million in severance pay. Which, again, that must be a Canadian rule, because here in the U.S., if the place closes down and they pull out, severance pay, what? You're lucky if you get, there's the door. You're just, I guess, supposed to automatically know. But they're $59 million in severance pay, which is, you go, wow, that's a lot of money. Almost 18,000 workers going to collect $59 million in severance pay, which, isn't horrible. But the CEO who got fired last May from Target walked away with $61 million. So again, I keep looking at this stuff, and the reason I bring it up is that at some point, working people in this country have got to go, hold on, something wrong. Two different playing fields. One for us way down here, and one for them way, way, way up there. And I keep going, hey, at some point, maybe we should be demanding something. Especially when you look at do you remember the Oxfam report that came out that pointed out in 2014, the richest 1% of the globe controlled 48% of all wealth on the planet? And by the end of next year, they claim the top 1% will own more of the wealth on the entire planet than 99% of us. They will go above 50% because it's that fast. The acceleration is happening that fast. The theft from workers, this giant second sound, if I can use a Ross Perot, the giant second sound is coming from your wallet upward. And with all these horrible trade deals, and there it goes. Even more and even worse. And what's frustrating to me is at some point I keep going, hey, we'll wake up. We'll figure it out. We'll stop it. I don't know. The fact that Scott Wagner came out with a bill that says, or an idea that we'll raise the minimum wage to $8.75, and I didn't hear, I don't know, maybe you did. Maybe you heard it. I didn't. A collective, what the are you talking about? There should have been a collective roar. And yet I didn't even really hear a whimper. And I guess we've been told for so long there's nothing we can do. Sorry, nothing for you. And we've bought it. How is it on one hand, as a nation, we're taught from the time we're little kids, we're Americans, damn it. Puff up your chest and pound. We're number one. Yet the things we're number one at, I don't know that any nation really wants to say, yeah, that's us. I mean, we used to be the nation that said, rising tide, all boats, all of us. Not a rising tide lifts one boat and crushes the rest. Just kind of a thought. We used to, and I think back to my grandparents. My grandfather has got to be flipping in his grave. Because their generation fought that we would have a better tomorrow. Yet I'm looking at today going, I don't know. What's wrong with us? Why do we put up with this? I point to this story that grabbed me. And, just stop, think of the numbers for a second. Evidently, the Department of Labor, their Occupational Safety and Health Administration, evidently they did an inspection. How many people have heard of Ashley Furniture? They're a big Arcadia, Wisconsin company that in Wisconsin employs about 4,500 employees. And this is where our trade policies, understand this. This comes back to our trade policies. This comes back down to, I'm just lucky to have a job. And I'll be honest, I've actually lived through this, so I have a little bit of understanding of this. So they're in this place called Arcadia, Wisconsin. They employ 4,500 people. And in the last 36 months, in the last 3 years, they have had more than 1,000 work-related injuries. So that means you line everybody up, and every fourth person, they're getting hurt. Virtually every fourth person. 1, 2, 3, you're hurt. 1, 2, 3, you're hurt. 1, 2, 3, you're hurt. And, being on workman's comp is no joy. It's a major loss of income. It's a major loss of life. It's a major pain in the you-know-what. And the OSHA people found that, and I understand, in order for OSHA to go to every workplace in this country, it would take about 111 years just to do it once. That's how limited their ability to inspect workplaces are. That's how badly their budgets have been starved. That's how badly the agency's been constrained and locked up and beaten away. once 111 years to go to every workplace. So they got to pick and choose, and evidently Ashley Furniture raised that up, which I got to wonder why, the company let them in. No, crazy, can't have it. More than 1,000 injured workers, though. The investigators found 12 willful acts of misconduct, 12 willful violations. Means they intended on it. They knew what they were doing. They knew the consequences, and they did it anyway. 12 repeated violations and 14 serious safety violations at this one location, and they have issued fines in the amount of $1.7 million, which I got to be honest is not a whole lot of money. Just not. That's a slap on the wrist to a company who's, I guess $3.5 billion in revenue, almost $4 billion in revenue. Not a big thing to me. In fact, I think they're 112, 117. So I think they're 117th on the largest private company list in the country. They are a Forbes company. According to the Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA, a guy named David Michaels, and this is the quote that caught my attention. David Michaels says, Dr. David Michaels, let me get that straight. Ashley Furniture intentionally and willfully disregarded OSHA standards and its own corporate safety manuals to encourage workers to increase productivities and meet deadlines. The company apparently blamed the victims for their own injuries, but there is clear evidence that injuries were caused by the unsafe conditions created by the company. OSHA, he says, is committed to making sure that the total disregard Ashley Furniture has shown for safety stops here and now. Now, remember, this is a private company, and I'm surprised that they let the doors open because there's a push on the radical right and on the business community to not let OSHA anywhere near. I got to wonder what hoops they had to jump through to get in to find those violations. Understand, 1 in 4 workers is injured. 36 months, and it takes them this long to decide to get in, to be able to get in there. Now, they're the largest employer in that county, which has about 30,000 people working there. So this is a main driver of their local economy. And, look, it's one of those hush-hush deals. The medical community is not going to complain. Why? It's a lot of patients. 1,000 people coming through on workers' comp. Hey, it's a great churn. Get lots of physical therapy, a lot of doctor fees, a lot of all this stuff. It's a nice game. Screws who? The state. Because understand, Wisconsin was the very first state in the country to have a workers' comp bill. So out of this, to me, it's just insane. We have not protected workers in this country. And again, I go back to my view. This is another reason why you need to have a union. Just my thought. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
They saw the food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought, help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer, people turn away, not equal to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew, and they cannot really on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Another day, another pipeline goes kablooey.
U.S. pipelines now rupturing faster than we can keep track of them.
The two brokered a new nuclear deal allowing U.S. companies to provide India with reactors for commercial purposes.
Obama's trip to India, a boost to nuclear energy.
We have a window of opportunity.
International Monetary Fund calls for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, plus some good news. Fracking banned in Scotland, and a red fox returns to Yosemite.
All of those returns and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yosemite National Park says a rare Sierra Nevada red fox has been sighted in the park for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
For listeners old enough to get that joke, you're welcome. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air, and even as pipelines are still rupturing all over the country, the U.S. Senate, it seems, has now finally passed a bill to force the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yep, it goes back to the House now, but they still don't have enough votes yet in the Senate to override a promised presidential veto. So it's just more theater.
And for the record, the 9 Democrats who are joining all of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to support Keystone XL pipeline, that would be Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, Tom Carper of Delaware, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, John Tester of Montana, and Mark Warner of Virginia. All of those Democrats calling for the dirtiest oil in the world to be shipped from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico to be shipped overseas for maybe 50 permanent jobs for a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Thanks, Democrats.
And a correction. Earlier this week, we mistakenly reported that there were 4 pipeline ruptures in the month of January alone in the U.S., but actually, we were wrong.
Who does your fact-checking, Desi Doyen?
In fact, there have been 5 pipeline ruptures in the month of January.
Oh, man, so it's worse than even you thought.
Yep, and there's a reason for these pipeline problems. An investigation on pipeline safety and oversight from the National Transportation and Safety Board released this week found, quote, systemic flaws. Not only are gas companies failing to conduct inspections and tests on their aging pipelines in populated areas, but the states have inconsistent regulations and not enough trained inspectors.
And by not enough, you mean sometimes none at all.
Right. Sometimes those states don't inspect any of them. President Obama's recent trip to India concluded with no climate agreement, unlike his recent historic emissions deal with China. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is not ready to commit to emissions cuts, but the two leaders did reach a modest agreement to cooperate on clean energy development and financing. The biggest winners, however, were the U.S. nuclear industry, because Modi agreed to repeal India's liability laws that require nuclear energy companies to pay all the costs of a nuclear accident, and instead will probably foist it off onto India's taxpayers.
So American companies are free to build nuke plants in India now without having to pay up if things go wrong?
That's right.
Nice. Thanks, Obama.
Calls are growing around the world for governments to use the current slump in oil prices to phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
We have a window of opportunity. The price of oil has gone down significantly and probably for a period of time. Now is the time to actually remove the world over the subsidies to use of energy.
Well, who was that hippie leftist calling for the end of fossil fuel subsidies?
That was the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, the world spends about $550 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. U.S. taxpayers shell out $5 billion to the oil industry in permanent tax breaks.
So the call is stop helping out these oil companies. They're doing fine. They don't need our help anymore. Put that money elsewhere where it can actually do some good.
That's right. Finally, some good news. Fracking has just been banned in Scotland. The temporary moratorium will allow the Scottish government to conduct scientific studies on environmental impacts. Pennsylvania's new Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, has also banned fracking in state parks and forests. And finally, the rare and elusive Sierra Nevada red fox has been spotted in Yosemite National Park for the first time in nearly 100 years. It's one of the rarest animals in North America. Likely fewer than 50 remain.
Wow, just 50. Nonetheless, some good news there. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. For more good news and occasionally some bad news, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are now celebrating our 11th anniversary of independent troublemaking and muckraking. But we need your help to continue. Please stop on by and consider a donation to help us do exactly that. Find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, on your mind. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Here to tell us what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. We've got Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So I understand another one of these horrible internet videos have popped up showing someone burned alive, huh?
This one was really bad. They're all bad, but he was a Jordanian pilot shot down. His plane crashed, and he was doing a bombing mission in Syria. He was captured. Now, they've been reaching out, ISIS has, to the Jordanians, and the Jordanians are actually willing to exchange about 3 to 4 people for the pilot. And the Jordanians said, we want proof he's alive. Well, a video surfaced. They killed him probably about a month ago, but they had almost like a contest of how to kill him with different ideas. They finally put him in a cage, put flammable material, probably gasoline, all over him, and they lit a trail to him, and he caught on fire, and then they bulldozered he and the cage down afterwards. It was just, they burned him to death. So as we speak, the Jordanian officials are preparing to execute the female suicide bomber and at least 2 other ISIS people, and they may just continue down the line with the ISIS people that they have in their jails in Jordan. So it's going to be an eye for an eye over there.
Yeah, I didn't see the video, but I had heard of it. I don't want to see. I don't want to see that stuff. It's horrible. It's gruesome. But to do something like this in the name of religion and all, I don't know. I struggle, man.
They're not even. This is not even going with the religion anymore in a sense. I'm looking at this. I'm trying to say, what do they get out of this? What do they think they're going to accomplish? And I just think, even beyond being like radically religious or something, they're just criminal murderers and just brutal people that like to kill. And by the way, there are other sites. There are constant beheadings, and they've got 2 guys. One of them, they're sitting there and they behead this guy, and then they have this fun time talking to the head that they beheaded. There's all kinds of. They're doing this to civilians everywhere.
And the truth of the matter is, this is where you see this stuff where it just infuriates you, which is where I'm not a big war proponent, but I got to be honest. There's part of me that goes, you go in there and you wipe these people out, and I don't know. I just like I said, I'm not a war person, but I understand.
This crew, I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. This crew is just out of control. And if I were a foreigner, I'd stay out of Syria and Iraq, that's for sure.
Well, if I'm a foreigner, I stay out of that entire region. Especially if you're a white guy.
I actually went to, for full disclosure, I'd say stay out of that region, but that Syria and Iraq, I actually did go to Beirut, Lebanon very quickly because I did a book
signing. Yeah.
So that's my last venture over there, though.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Bob, I like money and all that, but I hope they paid well.
Well, I don't know yet, but I've got to tell you, like I said, I got in there at 5 o'clock at night and left 4:30 in the morning. So.
Yeah, that's still too long. That's enough time for someone to grab you and set you on fire.
Yes, but
that's horrible.
I don't think I'll do it again.
Yeah,
terrible people in this ISIS group, just really horrible.
And what's also interesting to me is that there are people who sit and watch this stuff. I have no interest whatsoever in seeing this man's inhumanity to man play out before me, on the screen. I have no interest whatsoever in it.
Yeah, the one site is called Bare Naked Islam, and they say on the site that they print this because people need to know. But I understand the mainstream media not putting this on the nightly news.
Yeah, I don't need misery porn. I'm miserable enough without seeing other people's misery, and that's really, to me, what it's clickbaiting. It's about to me that's just my view. But I just don't think that and I think it's disrespectful to the people and their families. I think it's horrible.
Right.
Let's move along. Jeez, it's horrible. What's going on with the Cuba? I understand there's a big Senate committee and House meeting tomorrow.
Well, there is, and the Senate went on today, then the House tomorrow. Very interesting. If they would have had this hearing, Rick, when I was in Congress back in 1995, through 2000 some, there would have been only probably one set of people testifying, don't deal with Cuba. It's just all changed in Florida. So you had both sides to this issue. So you've got Florida Cuban American advocates saying, yes, let's deal. And then you have ones that are saying no. And it pointed out the divisions. You've got Senator Menendez, a Democratic member, is just really furious with the president over this. But then you have Barbara Boxer, and she said, we pursued the past few decades, pursuing a policy hasn't worked. And then Rubio, the Republican senator, is going crazy against this. But you've got Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, and he's introduced legislation to lift all the travel. So this one's going all over the place. This is not something that's just red state, blue state.
Yeah, I when I was down in Florida, the number of people that I spoke to, I was not able to find anyone who was thrilled with the idea. Most of the people that I talked to were concerned that there would be a flood of people from Cuba, and they'd be just overrun. Their social services would be overrun, and I couldn't find anyone who was thrilled with the idea. Personally, I think the time has come that we at least have some normalized relations, because it just seems. It seems we basically built up Russia. We're buying tennis shoes from Vietnam. I don't get the whole Cuba thing.
Well, as Americans, as Westerners, but Americans go down there, there'll be a big travel industry. It will create jobs. That'll keep a lot of people there in Cuba, and also it'll lighten up. I mean, when we had the boat lift before, Castro cleared out a lot of the prisons and the mental institutions. So that's not this case or scenario now, and that's what happened prior.
No, well, we'll see where it goes. I understand the Senate is about to take up the immigration bill.
Well, this is it, because this was the exit plan that doesn't work for the Republicans, so now they're going to have to recreate another exit plan. Bottom line is, because of the Democratic votes needed for the Republicans to succeed on this bill, is going to cause the Republicans to fail on the bill, because the Democrats, no way they're going to provide the votes for this, because it would undo the president's immigration rulings.
Right.
Now,
executive order.
Once this fails, the executive orders, yes. Once this fails, then they have till the Republicans, till February 27th, Rick, to do something, or Homeland Security goes bye-bye. And we all know with what's going on in the world, they picked the wrong agency. So there's going to have to be some kind of exit plan, because the Republicans simply, they've lost on this issue. It's done, and the bill is going to fail, and so they're going to have to huddle and decide how they will, try to keep their heads high on some form of an escape of the immigration. They have to escape themselves across the border.
And I just don't see that happening either. And speaking of escape, have you been following some of this anti-vaxxer stuff? The Chris Christie coming out and saying, he was in for choice. His people saying, well, he believes people should be vaccinated. This just seems like an insane issue on the right to me.
Well, a station today earlier had assumed that maybe Chris Christie, because the way he treated that Ebola nurse just is against, shots and things. I don't think it's the case. I think it's more of Christie, trying to run for president, and he thought there would be this groundswell of people saying, wow, yes, we should choose. I mean, the average person is like, okay, it's measles, yes. There is maybe, Rand Paul says there's a chance somebody could have a reaction to the shot, yes. But bottom line is, you don't want your child getting measles, and there's an epidemic potential breakout if we just stop vaccinating. So I think he was playing into something, Rick, and it's not there. It's just simply not there on this.
Is this the litmus test for the Republican presidential candidates? I mean, is this that first bit of crazy that pops out that starts weeding people out? Because I got to be honest with you. If you're going to come out and say something like that, I don't want you anywhere near the White House. I don't even want you walking down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Rand Paul, of course, fired the first, salvos and all this, but I really I don't think this is going to turn into a Republican mantra, of like Obamacare or something. It's just not down political lines.
Yeah.
And then you have other groups. I mean, there's always the religious element out there. And I don't know what church it is. I don't pretend to, but they don't want any form of medicine. And then, of course, children die, and then they're charged with manslaughter or potential murder. That's a religious thing. But this is where some people believe that these immunizations actually certain immunizations harm children. But it's like a flu shot. You always hear where somebody will take a flu shot and you could die from it, or have a severe reaction. And those are statistical odds. So I think anybody trying to latch onto this to look good and get into the flow of a presidential campaign is just going to put themselves under in about 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, the different religions, if I remember right, Christian Scientists, some of the Pentecostals, some of the Church of the Firstborn, those are the places. No medicine, no health care. We'll just pray it out. And I got to be honest, I that worries me. The whole "I believe" crowd scares me. Just is what it is.
Well, I've taken the same attitude in rehab when people say, "We'll just pray the heroin addiction out of them." Well, I don't think anybody stuck the needle in their arm, and I don't think anybody's going to pray it out. So when I hear that, I become alarmed.
Yeah, no, I mean it's any of that. That whole "I believe" crowd scares me. Because it's a lot easier to believe than it is actually to do the research and the hard work. So it's just, to me, it always seems like a cop-out. But, you look at, the 2016 Republican field is pretty big right now. And I see in Iowa, Rand Paul, Scott Walker at the head of the pack. Really? Where's Jeb?
Well, I got yelled at for this the other day, but I'm not trying to be funny about looks or you have to have, a perfect president, et cetera, or anything like that. But I'm sorry, Chris Christie's heavy, and that's like Grover Cleveland, President Taft heavy. Okay, that's cool. But Jeb Bush just looks lazy. He just looks, I'm sorry, pudgy lazy, and he does, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, Chris Christie did something about that. He went and he got the lap band, the stomach stapled. He got something done.
I know, but he's a what do you want to say? He's a kind of a different, he's a big guy, Chris Christie, and that can be okay. Jeb Bush just looks like rich,
like a couch potato. Yeah, I get you.
So, but beyond that, he is in single digits in the polls. Ben Carson, which most people won't even know who he is above Chris Christie, and you've got Huckabee third. You have Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin. He's got to have something going behind him because he's up there number one, Rand Paul, Huckabee, Ben Carson, then Jeb Bush.
Well, I mean, Scott Walker's the right-wing darling because he went after those dreaded unions and actually was reelected, which, again, the Koch brothers pulled that out of somewhere. So I can understand that. A lot of this early field stuff to me looks like the echo chamber of the right-wing talk radio who've been pushing people like Ben Carson. You're right. The average person has not a clue of who Ben Carson is. But if you watch fake news on Fox, if you listen to the Laura Ingrams of the world, you get Ben Carson.
And I think that Limbaugh endorsed Walker today, and it's very, very possible that mailers are going out from. And I'm not saying I know this to be happening.
I wouldn't doubt it.
But mailers could be going out from the Koch brothers. Mailers, things like that, because they can spend as they please.
Especially since he hasn't really announced whether he's even interested, right? So they can do anything they want because there's nothing going on. He's not a candidate. They're just out there pushing and hammering away. And look, they said they're going to spend $889 million in the next cycle. I would assume that's $889 million they plan on putting on the record. That doesn't. How much are they spending through the back door? That's scary stuff to me.
And Scott Walker has budget trouble in his state, and he also still has some hanging ethical issues from 4 years ago.
Yeah, well, but that doesn't matter to the right because they believe he's a good guy. And finally, strippers are fighting for rights. What's the world coming to?
Well, this may be one of the last shows I do with you because I'm going to apply for the job.
All right.
They're looking for a lobbyist. Now, this is they're taking a very and this is a true story. The strippers in Oregon, which is a big free speech state, they want some more working rights. So instead of, just complaining about it, they're actually working with some lobbyists in Oregon, and they're going to visit state legislators.
Good for them. They shouldn't hire a lobbyist. They should just bring their polls or just meet them at work. Because as a whole bunch of lobbyists, that's where they end up.
And they can also, they could get a lot of votes for these politicians, in places the politicians may go and not want to be seen or don't go.
Yeah. Look, I'm in favor of all workers having a voice on the job and having and more rights. So look,
yes.
More power to them.
Why not?
Good for them. They work awful hard, and they don't make an awful lot of money. And
That's right.
They're out there. So good for them.
Yes.
And I hope you get the job, Bob.
I'm going to try.
Thanks so much, Bob Ney.
Thank you.
Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
It's always interesting to see Congress in action, though interesting can also be appalling. For example, what a sight it is to watch Republican leaders as they gleefully try to repeal Obamacare, the law extending health care coverage to all Americans. As they vote one by one to kill it, their mantra is no to big government health care. What you can't see, however, is them later slipping down the hallways of the Capitol to a little-known exclusive medical office that gives them free health care, paid for by the same big government they were just ranting about. You might think that such raw hypocrisy would cause them to feel at least a twinge of moral discomfort, but apparently they've been immunized to prevent such outbreaks of morality. A good illustration of the congressional mindset is presently making the rounds on the internet. Called The Haircut, it tells the story of a barber who cut the hair of a florist, but refused to take payment from the flower peddler. "I'm doing community service this week," he explained. The next morning, when the barber went to his shop, he found a thank you note and a dozen roses at his door. His next customer was a police officer needing a trim. Again, the barber declined any payment. The next morning, he found a thank you note and a dozen donuts waiting for him, a gift from the grateful cop. Then, lo and behold, a congressman came in for a haircut. When he tried to pay, the barber once more waved off the money, repeating his commitment to community service. The lawmaker was delighted by this generous gesture. And sure enough, when the barber went to his shop the next morning, he was greeted by another surprise. A dozen Congress critters lined up waiting for a free haircut. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, it's just a matter of one's moral makeup. Assuming, of course, that you have a moral makeup.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Unless they change something this week, they'll be walking into the stadiums at 1 o'clock Sunday.
They will, and even if it does get resolved this week, we will see the replacement officials this weekend because that turnaround can't happen so quickly.
Whistle baby, I'm a scam.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. No, to be honest with you, I thought the officials did an outstanding job on Super Bowl Sunday. I thought they did, and it was a good game. Like I said from the beginning, I was hoping for snow. That would have been the perfect outcome. A little snow there in Arizona. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Of course, if you missed any portion of it, thericksmithshow.com is where you go get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Get the program on the go wherever you go. And also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Put it on your calendar Friday. Friday, we're doing the big meetup with the folks from the Raging Chicken Press at Anthony's Micro Brew and Pizza. They're in Harrisburg if you're going to be in town for the big Keystone Progress Pennsylvania Progressive Summit, paprogressivesummit.net, the website. If you still want to go, as John Newrohr said earlier in the program, they've got some seats left, got some spots. Make sure that you get yours. paprogressivesummit.net is how you go about doing that. Look, the big news. Bernie's coming to town. You're one shot to see Bernie in person. meet, greet, rub elbows, do whatever you do at these things. It's always a good time. It's always good to see folks congregate from across the state to figure out how do we move this Commonwealth forward and the country as a whole. 2016 is going to be a huge election year and a big decider in the direction of this country, I think, for at least a generation to come. The reality is, whoever the next president is, no matter whatever you believe, the next president, there's the potential of 4 Supreme Court justices. They're all getting up in age. And my fear is you have someone on the radical fringe who puts forth another Alito, another Roberts, another Clarence Thomas, real problems for generations to come, for not just women's rights, not just consumer rights, not just worker rights, but all of our rights. And to me, that's part of why we stay involved, why we're engaged, and why we do the work we do. And I hope to see you Friday night after Cecile Roberts, 7:30 there at Anthony's. Thanks for being here. Appreciate the well wishes. Thanks to all the people who wish me well from getting sick. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow. Or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the Buddha sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.